these protests, and there's so many places we can go about the ethics. There's a big debate. Uh, there's the protests, and then there's the riots, and how are they linked, and are they linked, and are they separable, and who's doing the rioting? Is it Antifa? Is it racist? Is it the police? Is it just random? Is it not random? The bricks, all this stuff. So there's lots of places this could go. But I want to talk on one of my perennial issues here, which is, I mean, the first issue I ever talked about on this channel. It's still the issue that it's one of the issues I'm most passionate about, and that's the whole gun control debate. It feels like potentially a really important pivot. Now, to answer my own question, I don't think there's any doubt that the gun control debate will continue. No single event is going to change everyone's mind on this. Definitive Supreme Court decisions are not going to change everyone's mind. They may reframe the debate. Um, uh, Wild, dramatic events like a mass shooting, or a mass shooting being prevented, or an example of protective gun rights. They may shift the debate a little bit, but they're not going to completely change it. And I think this is similar to that. However, what we're seeing now is interesting because the rhetoric of the left, and if they're anything, they have no standards but double standards, as Andrew Knoll says. So just because they have rhetoric one way, and we can't assume that they're going to be consistent about it. But rhetoric is that the police are violent and dangerous, and the police can't or won't protect you, or are actually a positive threat to you. And then that there's this mass rioting that's happening essentially in urban centers, which are essentially the kind of the citadel, the basis for gun control. The people in the world, in this country, who push gun control, who favor gun control, live in urban centers. They live in New York and San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Detroit, all these other places. And these are the places that are having the most rioting. And we've seen a skyrocket in the number of gun owners, the number of people buying guns, the number of people owning guns for the first time, as far as we can tell. Something like 40% of the last 3 months have been record-setting in terms of gun sales. We're up 75-80% compared to this time a year ago. So this time a year ago wasn't necessarily like the most busy time in gun sales ever, but that's a substantial increase in a year. And some large proportion, 40-50% of the people, are brand new gun owners. So we have a lot of people on the left, presumably, who are becoming gun owners, and whose rhetoric is kind of suggesting that it's important. Now, again, this isn't going to end it. But I just saw the other day, David Hogg tweeted, the police are basically tyrants who are oppressing people. Okay, I agree with that to a large extent, and if that's any time in the future now where he talks about gun control and says, well, you don't need to defend yourself or whatever else, people are going to have to remind him, hey, but what's the alternative here? If the police are hopelessly corrupt and racist and tyrannical, then what's the alternative? I mean, if we can't defend ourselves and the police can't be trusted with it, where does that leave us? Do we have an obligation to be a victim? Now, there are some gun control people who honestly believe that. I've talked to some, especially in Australia, articulate people who basically think you are never justified in using a gun in self-defense, even if the person attacking you is without question a criminal and you're without question innocent. And even if the scenario would be such that there's no chance you could harm an innocent, they are still against it. But that mentality is very rare in the United States. There are people who have it, but among those who even have that, they don't want to express it publicly because it's so unpopular. It's very similar to the people who favor abortion through the entire term. There's more people who believe that than are willing to actually say it because it's so unpopular, and so it goes so much against the grain of what most people tend to think. And so, again, this isn't going to clinch everything. Liberals can be hypocrites, and they can be liars, and they can change their mind with the next emotional event. But it is going to have to make some think again, or to refine their rhetoric, and in some cases to actually change their minds. So I want to go over some of these articles that have been coming out about this. There's been quite a few. I just did a search very quickly, Google search on gun sales way up. So gun stock prices and background checks are surging, so people are investing in gun manufacturers. Stocks are up more than 35% in the last 3 months. That's a lot. Baldwin County gun dealer seen big spike in handguns. Baldwin County's in Alabama. They say in that article that there's been basically a 100% increase over last year. The number of background checks is something in the for the month of May was something like 1.7 million. Now, a background check isn't necessarily a gun sale. Sometimes people do background checks and they end up not buying a gun, although typically it's the last step you do before you buy a gun. So there are some of those people who end up not getting one. Maybe they fail the test, or maybe their credit card doesn't clear or whatever, and they don't buy it. But also, you don't do a background check for every gun. You do a background check for a gun purchase. So if you do a background check, you can buy 2 or 3. So for every person who opted not, there's probably another person who bought more than one. And then, of course, there aren't background checks on any gun sales that happen to non-licensed dealers. And some states require you to do background checks anyway, but many don't, most don't. And so, the number of other sales that are going on, we really don't know. It's probably a lot. So let's go read some of these other ones. Gun sales break May record amid coronavirus pandemic and riots. And so there kind of was 2 stages here. You had the coronavirus, and I think a lot of people were like, okay, the police are letting criminals out. The police are not responding to calls as much. A lot of people are going to be desperate. A lot of people are going to be hungry. A lot of people are going to be angsty and angry or whatever else. It might make sense for me to start preparing to defend myself. And I know people like this who are like, they don't want anything bad to happen. They're worried about anything bad happening. They don't want to make there be trouble, but they want to be prepared in case something does go wrong. And so you started to see an uptick in gun sales in March. I think March was up 75% as well. So actually, that's not just an uptick. That's a huge increase. These, by the way, they factor these numbers as compared to the previous year. So compared to March of 2019, March of 2020, I think it was a 75% increase. And April was an 80% increase. Let's go. This is actually a good one to read, I think. Gun sales break May record amid coronavirus pandemic and riots. Right, so you have this whole coronavirus situation, and then on top of that, you get these riots. And the riots are interesting for a lot of reasons because, A, the police are kind of condoning them to a large extent. They're just allowing them to go on and not stopping them in many cases, or they're even making them worse. And I saw a video of, I think it was in LA, and there were some shop owners who were defending their business with guns, brandishing them. They had not fired anything yet. And there was a news reporter there covering it. And the police finally started to show up, and so the would-be looters ran away, and when the police showed up, they immediately started arresting the gun-toting owners. And the reporter was trying to plead with the cops, hey, these guys were not looters. They were defending themselves. They were defending their property. They're not the problem. And then, the cops just yelling at her and telling her to shut up and calm down in the most obviously aggravated way. And I actually didn't see how it ended. I would hate to think, but it could have happened, that they ended up arresting the actual owners, taking them away, and then leaving their shop open to be looted by the people who had been successfully stopped. That's probably happening, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. Like in that case, I mean, I could see police departments being anti-gun and going after people who brandish guns. In this case, it seemed more just like mistake. Like, oh, we're on scene, you people have guns, we're taking you away, and it wasn't, oh, this is a secret way to do gun control. But people are seeing that, business owners are seeing that, and they're being forced to confront, hey, this could happen to me. And you also see videos where people try to defend their businesses with, like baseball bats. Well, that's just not going to be good enough if you're outnumbered. All right, baseball bat might work against somebody who's a lot smaller than you, or if there's only one person. But the whole part with riots and looters is they don't travel in singles, and this gets into, obviously, a baseball bat's not going to cut it. A gun is going to be more important, and not just any gun. This is where, why do you need an assault rifle, so-called? Why would you need a semi-automatic rifle? Well, that would be a good reason to have one, because when you have multiple attackers, you're going to want that over a bolt action or a shotgun or something like this. So here we go. I don't know where this Fox Business article is saying that gun sales spiked more than 80% over this year in May. Um, Approximately 1,726,053 guns were sold in May. There's no way they can have an exact number like that because they don't record them. Um, a record-breaking 80.2% increase from last year, according to data released by late Monday by the Small Arms Analytics and Forecasting, which examines the raw data obtained by the FBI National Instant Background Check System, or NICS. The NICS is designed. Look, NICS is fascinating. NICS was, I think, very clearly intended as a halfway step towards registration. It wasn't registration. They could not pass registration at the time. It seemed very clear that this was intended as a halfway step to a registration, and they just never took the next half step because there was significant, thank God for the NRA and the GOA, and to whatever extent you want to give Republicans credit for that. So they don't track every gun. There are some states that do, but nationally there aren't. So it says of the firearms sold, 1,050,723 were handguns, 535,000 were long guns. Now, of those long guns, I would be curious how many of them were semi-automatic assault weapons and how many were like bolt-action hunting rifles. My guess is people weren't buying too many hunting rifles. Um, Gun stocks soar as loot interrupts in America. Yeah, totally true. And again, where is this happening? This isn't happening in rural areas. Because just the economics of riding just doesn't make as much sense there. You got to travel farther for less. They have less police, but people are better armed, and people are less likely to condone. And we have videos of sheriffs. I think he was the sheriff in Polk County, Florida, which might be where Tampa is. But just saying, I'm telling the people to shoot you if you try and riot here. And so you combine this with um, the rebuke of the police. Now, I hate look, the cops piss me off all the time. The thing I don't like about the police protests is the insistence that the critique be racial, that the only thing we can say about the cops is that they're racist. And there are cases where they probably do act racistly, but systemically, I actually don't see the evidence for that. And the problem is that then diminishes the problem. And so instead of a problem of police abuse, it becomes a racial issue where it really necessarily shouldn't be. The police kill white people all the time and with impunity. And in fact, they kill more white people than they kill black people. And I know, well, the population is different, yes, but who gets reported for crimes is not the same. And for the proportion of the murderers or the proportions of people who have crimes reported on them, blacks are slightly underrepresented in terms of people getting killed by police. But so it's always annoying to me when no one cares about Douglas Lemp or Daniel Shaver, or these white people who get gunned down, even though they're clear examples of homicide. I mean, Shaver's, the cop who killed him, his AR was inscribed, "You're fucked." And when he went to court, the judge said that was inadmissible. I wonder if the gun had said, "I'm going to kill you even if you're innocent because I feel like it and I'm aggressive." If that had been on the gun, the judge probably would have also said that that was inadmissible. We'll never know because that guy walked. So I find that really annoying, but I'll find the silver lining here. The bottom of the line is not only are the cops unreliable in terms of protecting you, which newsflash, they have no obligation to do, and they never have. This has been one of the few things the Supreme Court's been consistent on. They haven't been consistent on slavery. They haven't been consistent on minimum wages or things like that, because after the progressive era, they just started discovering that the government had more power than it ever had before. But when it comes to the government's duty to protect you, they've been consistent in saying that it has none. You can't sue them if they don't protect you. They don't owe you anything. The only people they owe anything are people they have in custody. If you're in prison, then they owe it to you to some extent, but that's it. And so they're not obligated to protect you. They may not be willing to protect you, and even if they are, they're practically speaking not able to protect you. And so you need to protect yourself, and organize with people who will be more reliable than that. So you're getting a lot of these kind of neo Black Panther organizations that are arming up and talking about arming up, and organizations like the NRA and the GOA are all about that, and they will definitely help. You don't have I don't see any right-wing people coming out and saying, no, please don't arm yourselves. Guns are only for white people. We don't want this. Nobody's saying that. They see this as increasing, getting allies on a single issue that they care about, which is how I feel about it, right? I'm not going to necessarily agree with the politics of every person who is saying, okay, black neighborhoods, we need to arm up. I'm not going to agree with all their politics for sure. But this is a really, really important issue. This is, in many respects, the most um, important issue for me. And so if more people get on board, and especially, if 40% of those firearms, so we don't know, so 1.7 million firearms doesn't mean 1.7 million people. Let's say a million people, and let's say 40% of them are new. So that means 400,000 people who, I mean, they never owned guns up to this point, which means they're probably liberals, right? If you were conservative and you didn't own a gun up to now, I don't know what to tell you. So like, some large fraction of them are liberals. Well, a lot of liberals just became gun owners. So cheers to that. That's amazing. Holy shit, we got things here. So, uh, police are also being pitchforked so much that they're becoming increasingly ineffective at protecting people, even when they're actually trying to help ANCAP protection services. Yeah, so they're in this catch-22 where they are damned if they do and damned if they don't, right? If they try and protect people, then the way that they operate, they're just going to piss people off because they're going to cause abuses. And some people are just going to say everything's an abuse, and look, my ANCAP libertarian sovereign citizen tendencies kind of put me in that box anyway, but just even the left wing, identitarian collectivist liberals are going to start to see that way, right? The ivory tower progressive elite white people are going to look at it and be like, oh, they're imposing their white hegemony onto the black community. It doesn't matter how many of the cops are themselves black, or if the police chief is black, or the mayor is black, which is very often the case in these cities. That's the way they're going to talk about it. And I think the black communities themselves are divided among people who say, hey, we've got lots of crime problems, we want some police here, or what, and those who are saying, yeah, get the pigs out of here. So they're kind of in a damned if they do, damned if they don't, which, quite frankly, they've put themselves in that position. So fuck them for doing that, right? Like, they don't deserve. Uh, I mean, I don't have any sympathy for them. They put themselves in that position where they say we're going to protect you and blah blah blah, and then now we've got to this point because of social media and phones and the digital photography that, when they commit abuses, which they've been doing all along, but now it's much more blatantly. I mean, if anything, they've become less diabolical when it comes to killing black people than they have in the past. But now it's all up there in front. And also, because things have gotten basically better, we have got this microaggression where people are getting more and more upset over smaller and smaller things. And let's face it, getting killed by being choked out with a knee on your throat for a $20 fake bill, that's not a microaggression. That's a serious, serious thing. So people are justified in being angry about it. Now, they're not justified in fucking rioting and destroying businesses and burning Target, and like, that's not justified. But being angry is. So the police are kind of putting themselves in a really bad spot here. And yeah, so 30 bullets for 30 rioters. Yeah. Well, you want to have multiple magazines, so more like 100. But this is exactly why you need something like this. Like, I mean, I would take I mean, handguns have lots of bullets. They don't have the same stopping power, but Canada's got a three round limit, so you don't want, or a bolt action that's got 5 rounds. It's just not going to be the same. It's pop, 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 pop. So, and it's interesting, the liberals have this contradiction when it talks to guns, where they say, on the one hand, they're far too deadly, far too powerful. You can't let civilians have them because they're just too enormously powerful. But then on the other hand, they say, oh, but they would be completely irrelevant if you actually had a war because the government has tanks. Well, which one is it? They're either these unbelievably potent weapons that civilians should never be allowed to touch, let alone own, or they're, these weapons of war, quote unquote, or they're completely ineffective. If they're completely ineffective, then you shouldn't mind if we own them. Now, you could say, well, maybe there's a middle ground there, but the rhetoric that they employ, there is no middle ground. It's just a binary. They're weapons of death, and that's it. I mean, the recent ban in Canada, Justin Trudeau said these guns' only purpose is to kill as many people as possible. All right, the RCMP has these guns, so but the implication of his own logic is that you're giving the RCMP guns to kill as many people as possible, and there's no other explanation. Except he does allow Native Americans to continue to own them, even though they have the highest homicide rate. Ironically, because he says these guns are not for hunting, but then he says Native Americans can own them for hunting. Now that those explicit points, but are not going to be echoed in the United States necessarily because there's a different dynamic, but that complete contradiction is still going to be there. Dave Smith did a good podcast. Yeah, so I listened to Dave Smith's podcast when I was driving back from hiking today. U.S. cops kill 4 more people than European cops kill, but to leftists, that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that it's racially fair. It's absolutely true that U.S. cops kill more than European cops. I think the British cops last year killed 2 people, period. The American cops kill, on average, over 2 people every day. So U.S. cops are much more violent, but Americans are also much more violent. Americans are much more likely to be homicidal than Europeans, and I think that there's some selection bias there in who decided to move to America, genetic or cultural or both. I think it's both. Americans are not Europeans. Americans are much more likely to turn to violence. And it's not just black Americans, it's white Americans as well, although they certainly push up the averages. But it doesn't matter, we're all more violent. And it makes sense that the police reflect that some, but they, because of their sovereign immunity and because of their limited liability and because the prosecutors are in their court and because of the way they're lionized and the way they've been militarized and weaponized. And again, I highly recommend the book The Rise of the Warrior Cop by Radley Belko here. They're just much worse. They don't have billy clubs. They have fucking SWAT teams with assault rifles and armored personnel carriers, and it's really bad. And their attitude is really bad, and their attitude is completely above the law. Look, I've gone on dates with cops, and I don't think that they've ever killed anyone, but like their attitude is, I'm above the law. There's regulations for you, and I don't have to follow them. I can speed, I can park wherever I want, I can drunk drive, I can have tinted windows when you can. It's a small thing. The guy was like, well, wait a second, he's telling me he's got tinted windows. I'm like, wait a second, I've gotten tickets for tinted windows. He goes, yeah, I've written tickets for tinted windows. I'm like, well, how? And he goes, well, I got a badge. Well, fuck that attitude, dude. And that attitude is the first step on the way to you fucking killing people because you know you're going to walk away. But the left, they don't care that it's equal. I mean, that's not the thing. It's any anecdotal example of a white person killing a black person doesn't matter what the ratio is. If Floyd was the only black man killed by police last year, only black man, if they'd killed 1,000 white people and 1 black guy, they would still be freaking out about it because that's the one example. And I'm not justifying the police fucking murdered that guy. It's just saying that they're charging him with 2nd-degree murder now because that's not going to stick. He's going to walk. It was manslaughter or 3rd degree was the only thing that was going to work for him. So he's going to walk now, sadly, because he's a fucking criminal, dude. He's a murderer. Unless they can prove that he knew him, which apparently he might have. I took an intro and inequality class as a requirement for my diploma. Every chapter was an attack on the white power structure, combining that with the riots and starting to... Yeah. Culture of Critique has been very draining for me. It's a great book, but it is very draining. But I will say that once you read it, you see it all over the place. You see that influence all over the place. It's also good for the palliative for the idea that all Jews are like that, because there are definitely Jews who don't buy into that. I always think about the guy who wrote the Trayvon hoax. You read what he has to say, he is not he's exactly the opposite on every issue. So like there definitely are like nationalist American Jews who don't buy into the culture of critique. It's just they're not in academia. They're like outright making documentaries and voting for Trump. But yeah, one of the interesting thing. Alternative Hypothesis did a really good video on this recently about bias among the police, and he points out surveys of blacks show that blacks who are younger and higher educated believe they've been more discriminated against than older, less educated blacks, which is just obviously impossible. If there's any discrimination at all, people who grew up, I mean, this was even true for cohorts who grew up during Jim Crow. So people who grew up when there was actual segregation rate that their discrimination that they've experienced is less than people who, are 22 and went to Harvard because they've been educated to see that everywhere. They've been educated to see oppression everywhere and microaggressions everywhere. And so these people are, think it's a hate crime if someone touches their hair or asks where they're from or because their band-aid isn't black. So when you're freaking out about a microaggression and then you see a video of a guy getting choked to death with a knee, yeah, I can see why you would react. And I'm not saying it's an overreaction in that case. That's a fucking homicide right on camera. And the guy was going to walk because all this stuff happened. He's going to have a fake trial where he will then walk, which could cause even more riots, sadly. But that's the goal. Make you lethargic, apathetic, not involved. 0.5 million isn't that much. No, you're right. But it is also only after just 1 month. So that is a lot. And the thing is, those guns will stay in circulation forever. And we don't know what's going to happen next month. My guess is the sales will continue to rise. And those are all people who will no longer really support gun control in the way they previously did. I think some of them will, but some of them won't. And it's the thing is that these are not marginal voters. These are people who've never owned guns before. They're living in cities. These people are almost always a lot of them will have been people who supported gun control, and they're going to do so a lot less now, which is good. There shouldn't even be a debate on the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment says it all. Yeah, that's a good point. It's nice to see that there's a rhetorical shift, but I totally understand the idea that there shouldn't be a debate here at all. This is a non-negotiable right. As Michael Malice sometimes says, just fuck you. This isn't a debate. I'm not debating this. And this is why people get mad at gun rights people and say, why are you so intransigent? And they're like, we've already compromised. We should be way towards the Second Amendment than we already are. We've already given up so much ground. And of course, whether you want to admit this or not as a liberal, the policy pushers who are trying to pass gun control, they have an explicit strategy of incrementalism where they want to try and get it to what they would describe as an Australia or UK style, which is basically massive bans. And there isn't a single gun supporter or gun rights supporter in the country who doesn't know that. And so, yeah, they ask an inch so they can take a mile. So fuck you, you don't get your inch. But this is going to be thrown in their face from now on. I'm going to throw it in their face. Every gun rights person is going to throw it in their face. And that's to the good. Does that mean it's going to change all their minds right away? No, it doesn't. But it's going to help with some cases. Yeah, repeal the NFA. Fully automatic machine guns, no questions asked, over the counter. I'm not even kidding. The NYPD stood inside a subway car cabin while a man was brutally stabbed. They only came out after the suspects were restrained by other rioters. Yeah, they have no obligation to defend you, even if they're standing there watching. They don't. And this is just a big myth. People are shocked when you tell them that. They're like, no, that can't be right. No, this is very clear constitutional law. It's been debated forever because you think that's the first case where police were on hand when there was a murder or homicide or an assault or a rape or a burglary or whatever it was, and let it happen. It happens all the time. There's this kind of this fear and vaunting. Garrett described the American Empire this way: this fear and vaunting, like we're super tough, we're the best, and then but we're terrified because Cambodia or whatever. Cops are often like that. Cops are like, yeah, I'm the tough guy. I'm on the front lines to defend you. You need me to protect you. You need me to take a bullet for you, blah, blah, blah. Who you're going to call when you get... And then when it actually happens, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to go. And this is the worst at school shootings where, like, they just don't go in there and they cower outside and they let the school shooters go. I mean, those cases should be the cases that we all look at. Parkland, Florida was just a classic example, man. There were cops on scene. There was a cop on scene right then. There were 4 more officers there within just a couple minutes, and they didn't go in. Their own chief of police said they didn't go in, and they never went in until it was over. The shooter left and went to Subway. David Hogg, what? Where's your thought? What are your thoughts on that, David Hogg? What do you think? What's the lesson there? The police at these demonstrations are by definition counter-protesters. I'd have to think about that to see if I agree. They're just afraid gun owners shoot progressives. I think London was still less violent than the U.S. even when they had gun laws like ours. Yeah, New York and London. New York has basically always had 5 times the homicide rate as London, um, going all the way back to colonial times. So there are some wiggy things. The way the U.S. counts homicides is makes more sense to me. Basically, they find a dead body and there's no evidence it was a suicide. It's a homicide. In the UK, it's not a homicide until they convict somebody of homicide. So if they find a body that's been stabbed repeatedly and it's dead, that's not a homicide until they make an arrest, have a trial, and get a conviction. It also wigs up the statistics because if that happens, say the person's found dead in 2019 and they get a conviction in 2020, then the stat goes to 2020. So there've been some couple years where they've like caught serial killers, and so they get convicted, and suddenly you get 8 or 9 or whatever homicides all of a sudden. But they are undercounting the coroner's inquest that they perform in England, the way that they do it, they're undercounting their homicides by some significant amount. Now, I'm not saying they're as high as they are in the United States. They're probably not, but they could be double what they claim. They very easily could be double what they claim, just because you don't get a conviction in every homicide. Every dead body doesn't lead to a guilty verdict in a court. So there's big differences in how they count them and how the U.S. counts them. The way the U.S. counts them makes a lot more sense to me than the way they do it there. I can see the logic. Hey, until we get a conviction, how do we know it was a homicide? Okay, but I mean, if the point is to make people understand what are the risks that they're going to get killed violently, and you're only going off of, I mean, if the U.S. counted them that way, the homicide rate would be cut in half because they don't even make an arrest in half the homicides. But yes, that's absolutely right. The United States has always been more violent than the UK. Always. Look, the people who moved to the United States are not the same people who stayed behind, and the conditions aren't the same. They're different in almost every way. So that's, I hate those comparisons of those when they compare like and like. Oh, the UK and Australia, dude, the apples and oranges, buddy. Those are completely different. Makes more sense to compare the US to Mexico or Brazil or Russia than it does to the UK. Did you know the cops originated from Irish gangs? I don't know the history of the early formation of the police, but that wouldn't surprise me at all. Uh, London homicides have gone up steadily since the handgun ban. They went up for about 7 years, but it has to be admitted that they were low, and then they kind of stagnated. And I don't know, that was the first 10 years after the ban. I don't know about since then. They were low though, and I think we should always point that out. And that's the thing, is they were always low. It's especially true when you look at mass shootings. The UK has, in its entire history, 3 mass shootings. Okay, 2 before the ban, 1 after. There's one in 2008 in Cumbria, and then there was Dunblane and one other one way back. That's black swan events. Those so rare that statistically it doesn't mean anything. So the argument for Australia is a little bit stronger, but it's still incredibly weak and unpersuasively so. And that's only if you look at mass shootings. If you just look at homicide rate, it's not there at all. Um, so again, apples and oranges between the two countries. It's just amazing that they can take a country that has a low homicide rate, put a gun ban, and then say, look, they have a low homicide rate. Yeah, they did before the ban. That's like strong empirical evidence that the ban is not the reason, because how could the ban go back in time and make the gun? Yeah. Yeah, the same people who were condemning protesting literally last week are now in favor of rioting. Liberal understand it's our Mason. Yeah, this has been one of the amazing things. The same people who a month ago were saying, how dare you protest the lockdown? How dare you protest? You're putting people at danger. Grandma's going to die. You hate children, blah, 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 are now saying, I'm joining the protest. Oh, I cannot tell you how many guys I've talked to on Grindr, like, I can't meet. It's too dangerous. I don't want to, oh, by the way, Black Lives Matter, I'm going to go protest. Well, And all I can say is that that's what the media has been saying, and these people are basically, they are completely susceptible to the narrative driving, the narrative manufacture of the media. What the media tells them to think, they think. And so when the media tells them, oh, these people are just racist, selfish people putting others at risk because they can't wait to get their hair done, so they're evil and stupid and racist and dumb. But then when they say, oh, this is a legitimate issue and they care about it, and I don't know how many people have said, I've seen people post about, I've really thought about this for a long time and it's a serious issue. Yes, police brutality is a serious issue. Why don't you read a book about police brutality? Read Rise of the Warrior Cop or any number one of 100 other books about it, right? There's been a lot of work on this. Listen to Will Grigg, and he's dead now, but he did so many great interviews on this over the years. Or Scott Horton or whoever else. No, they never did any of that stuff, but the media says, look at this tragedy, and I admit that it is. And so that's what they think. And then they think that they're this introspective, brilliant person. But like a month ago, they were saying anyone who protests is evil and selfish, and now it's like, let's go out and do it. There's a whole video just right there. Black Gun Matter. Yeah, I have that shirt too. Maj Toure. There's a whole bunch. I mean, there's been a movement here for a while, so it's already nascent. It's already been going on, ongoing. It's already happened in Detroit because you already had the police just switching off in Detroit like over a decade ago. So this is something that's, the seeds of this have been planted and have already been growing, and this is going to be fertilizer for them. I find older black guys more chill than younger ones. Dude, the younger ones are indoctrinated into microaggressions and racial identity and all this stuff when everyone else was growing up on the whole MLK, judge them by the content of the character and all that stuff. So it's just fascinating because, yeah, how could somebody who goes to Harvard and is upper middle class and has a job at a good company, they've been great. You could say, oh, maybe somebody looked at them or whatever. Okay, fine, fair enough. Let's just admit that happened and that counts as some kind of persecution. Okay, whatever. That there's no way that's worse than somebody who grew up during Jim Crow. There's just no way. And yet they will rate that they've suffered more. So it's a perception. Good evening, Glenn. I wonder if the cops will pick a jury trial or let a judge decide. Oftentimes, in low-profile cases, they choose a judge. Well, Jared, you could tell me, is this up to the plaintiff? He can decide if he wants a jury or a judge? I feel like they have now overcharged him and he'll get acquitted, but I could be wrong. Are we headed for the summer of hate? Another thing about this is we've had, these months of lockdown, people have been cooped up. So there's a lot of angst, and that's not the only thing going on for sure, but that's definitely exacerbating what's going on. I'm a Canadian gun owner. I just got a letter in the mail from the government saying I got 2 years to turn in any unauthorized guns. So I'm assuming, I mean, there's been a long gun registry and there's been a handgun registry, so they know what you have, I assume. So I wonder what's going to happen. This is, by the way, most Americans don't give a shit, but every gun owner in America knows about that, and that's why they will oppose registration. It won't stop a single crime. It's just there for confiscation down the road. That's the only reason to have it. Maybe we should move to New Hampshire. Seems nice. Canadian concealed carry. Uh, so New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont, those three states, and there's others, all have what's called constitutional carry, which means you can carry without a permit. And I'm going to guess that you can as a Canadian citizen, but I'm not 100% on that. At Porkfest, there's been Canadians with guns, so make of that as you will. What do you think of the remarkable number of giant corporations that came out not just against the killing, but BLM specifically? That came out for them or against them? And I don't know. Uh, it's not it's not hilarious though, because given how staffed they are with people who went to Ivy League schools, it's not surprising that many of these companies would have such strong liberal, progressive, identitarian biases. Then you find it hilarious that we're forced to hand over a third of our income, a portion of a portion for police services. Yet when the riots and looting start, they do nothing to protect us. Absolutely, and it's the same with the military. We had to spend $1 trillion a year on a military. And when you ever get in a debate, they can get all righteous and high and mighty and say, "We're here to defend you. We're here to protect you. We have the authority to rule over you and to govern you and to order you around and to do whatever we want. But it's fair and it's right and it's just and it's necessary because we'll quote defend you, protect you, whatever it is." And then when 19 guys with box cutters, who, by the way, are mostly angry because of our policies, of the government's policies, when they decide to attack, they got shit all. They couldn't get their shit together and they couldn't stop it. I mean, there's debates that they shot down Flight 93, but they don't even claim that. So I'm going to go with the story that they didn't stop a single plane. They didn't do a shit. They couldn't even defend themselves. And the same thing with cops. We got to pay taxes for cops. We got to pay their salaries. We got to make the payouts when they do something wrong and they get in trouble. They got sovereign immunity. We have to pay for all that stuff. And then you call them up and you need help. Maybe. No obligation, nothing. You got to pay the same no matter what. And that's the problem with every government service. So it's not a surprise that that's how they are. I mean, if I had a job and I got paid whether or not I did it or not, I might not get out of bed. Why would I? Not only that, the corporate media pours gasoline on the fire as well. Go race riots. Yeah, I mean, the riots are news and there's narrative setting. So again, police kill over two people a day on average. It's just they don't care unless it's a white officer and a black man. So killing white people, blacks killing blacks, all that stuff doesn't really matter. And then they can just build this narrative. And I'm still amazed when I tell people the police kill white people and they're like, allegedly. I'm like, no, there's no question about it. None. They do it all the time, every day. George Floyd is the hero who cured COVID. Apparently, these lockdowns better end. I don't know what the argument for keeping them. If we're saying people can go riot and protest, it's going to be interesting what Governor Whitmer in Michigan says. Even better are the people protesting here in London, where the UK, we still have one of the biggest number of corona cases, and they protest US events. It's so weird that they protest police brutality in the UK. I saw Joseph Watson's video on that. He says last year the UK police killed 2 people, and one of them was a mass murderer on a bridge. What's the problem? I mean, we are the United States. I guess everyone pays super close attention to us, but like, come on. 3 months they'll change the name again. 18 minutes till curfew. Where are you that there's a curfew? Defendants can choose, I know, but I'm not sure if the judge or prosecutor can deny and require a jury. I don't know. I'm sure his union is going to be all over protecting him, and I'm sure they're cozy with the prosecutor. And I think that the fact that they raised the charges mean they made it a much harder case to convict him, so he probably won't get convicted now. Have any local restaurants closed in your area because of the lockdown mandates? So there were some that closed temporarily. My favorite Chinese place closed temporarily, but since reopened. I don't know of any of the restaurants that I regularly go to if they're still totally closed. And they're now, I mean, takeout was legal this whole time. Drive-through was legal this whole time. About 3 weeks ago, they started letting businesses allow people to dine outside. So picnic tables showed up everywhere, and I think it's going to be pretty soon that they'll just let them be open. I'm sure some have closed. I don't know of any personally at this time. I just resumed jujitsu. Jujitsu and gyms both open on Monday. Um, they have a lot of stringent rules, so we can't roll, which sucks. They're hoping, they don't know for sure, that apparently their hands are completely tied by the governor. Um, they're hoping within a week or two that'll abate, but we'll see. Regarding overcharging, apparently if they charge with murder in third degree, he must have been a danger to people in general. If the prosecutor can't prove someone else could have died by the knee. Uh, Normally for the overcharging, the jury can convict on a lesser offense. So instead of second degree murder, the jury could still convict with third degree. Oh, well, that's, I guess, good. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I feel like you should be tried for a particular crime, and if they can't convict you of it, then that should be it. Like this whole, I know it's not technically double jeopardy, but if you're just going to lay on, okay, let's charge with every single possible crime, and I'm not like keen on just retooling the entire justice system just to get a conviction. Uh, hey Luke, how did it go? You know what I'm talking about. Um, there was a black police officer who choked a black teen, and that was barely talked about. Yeah, it doesn't fit the narrative. So black on black crime doesn't matter. I mean, really, black, like private crime, police crime, if it's black on black, it's not an issue. They don't care. It's only if it's white on black, then it's all of a sudden a huge problem. Or even like white sounding, but you're Latin American, so you can be a white Hispanic like George Zimmerman, defending like clear cut self defense against somebody who attacked you, and that's going to be a problem because they'll just pretend like you're white. They invented a whole term for him. They just called him white Hispanic. Yeah, the left was just bitching about right-wing protesters against Corona, and now they are pro-riots. Totally changed in like the course of a week. What do you think the psychological mindset of most cops are? I think they were bullied in high school. I would hesitate to say they all had some kind of archetypal experience. They are on average shorter than most men. Like the average height, the average cop is lower. So I do think that many of them do have some kind of masculinity inferior complex. Maybe it's because they're shorter, maybe because their dicks are smaller. Who knows? And but I think a lot of them just crave the authority. Like they crave the idea of being in charge. You know, they were the guy who was the safety patrol officer or student body president or whatever. And this is a way to get unearned status, right? Everyone wants status, and you can just get a badge and suddenly you have status. Now you don't have it all the time, but you put on that badge and you pull somebody over, you're the motherfucker in charge, and it doesn't matter who that other person is, you're in charge. And a lot of people like that. And they don't necessarily have to have an archetypal, childhood for that to be the case. The tyrannical governor of Massachusetts has no issue with protesting and disruptions occurring in Boston, but won't let people sit in restaurants. Yeah, what a hypocrite. Will Adams, you should come up to PorcFest in New Hampshire. It's much better. You should be coming up here to avoid taxes anyway, like most of the people in Mass do. Miami just found out it was moved till 9 tonight. I'm sure the gun market's going to go up for a long time. Buying pistols right now, these riots are scary. I'm not personally scared of the riots, but I've got guns in case it does get scary. It was clear cut Zimmerman was pursuing him initially, right? I don't think we will ever know. Yeah, he did. Zimmerman saw Trayvon walking around in the rain at night. Now, Trayvon was probably not committing robberies. Trayvon was probably not doing anything illicit. He was on the phone with his girlfriend, and Zimmerman was suspicious, and Zimmerman did follow him around. However, he couldn't find him. He lost track of him, so he went back to his car. And as he was going back to his car, away from wherever Trayvon came up behind him and said, "You got a problem," and just attacked him. So if you think somebody's following you, like if you're doing your own business and you see somebody being a Janet or a Karen and paying attention to you, you don't get to just go and attack them. Okay, so that's what happened. And we do know what happened because we have what Zimmerman said. The physical evidence matches what Zimmerman claims. And there was a neighbor who witnessed it. I think his last name is Good. I think his first name might have been Philip Good. But he was a neighbor who was right there. It happened basically on his property or on the road adjacent to his property. And that's what happened. So, yeah, we pretty much know what happened. And it would be interesting to talk to Trayvon's actual girlfriend, Brittany Diamond Eugene. That's the girl he was on the phone with. But when the defense, sorry, the prosecutors, the family's attorney wanted there to be a trial. They wanted there to be a charge so they could sue the homeowners association, right? If there was an arrest, if Zimmerman got arrested, they could sue the homeowners association for a couple $1,000,000, which they did. There wasn't enough evidence for there to be an arrest, though. So they called Brittany Diamond Eugene and they said, "Here, why don't you say that in your phone call? We don't know if they must. I'm curious if they asked her what happened in that phone call. What were you and Trayvon talking about? Did you talk about Zimmerman at all? There's a good chance they didn't even talk about what was happening at the moment. They could have been arguing. He'd been arguing with her. You know, she basically had another boyfriend that she was more interested than him, and they were probably talking about that. Basically, they came to her and they said, "Will you make a statement saying that Zimmerman attacked him?" And she did. She didn't write it out. Somebody else wrote it out, and then she signed her name, Diamond Eugene. Well, then they continued to press her about going to trial, and she basically backed out and says, like, "Yeah, I'm not going to go and commit perjury in trial." She wasn't that dumb to do that. And so what they did a witness swap where they found her cousin, a girl by the name of Rachel Gentile. And Rachel Gentile is the one that you saw on television. She's the one that was on Pierce Morgan, blah, blah, blah. And she's a retard. She's actually retarded. She was 18 and she was a freshman. Okay, no, and it's not her. I don't blame her for being retarded. I blame her for fucking committing perjury. That's not even her name. Like the statement that got the arrest, that got the murder charge was signed Diamond Eugene. The girl on the stand was Rachel Gentile. Why do you call it that? Oh, it's my nickname. You signed your nick. There was a witness swap. They had to find a new witness. So my guess is, if she had actually, if that conversation had anything that would implicate Zimmerman more, if that conversation involved anything that would exonerate Trayvon's actions, that's what we would have heard about. That's what would have happened. That's not what happened. They had to do a witness swap because the actual witness didn't have anything that was going to help their case. And they fucking swapped out and they ruined the case, and fucking they're all getting their asses sued off their minds now by George Zimmerman, and they should. They're pieces of shit what happened there. So I'm satisfied that's what happened. What's the height cutoff for being considered short? 6 feet. No, it's more like below average. So like, I don't know, 6'9" and below. Yeah. Trayvon was a good kid. He was only out buying Skittles and ice cream. New intact guy in the world. Birth was horrific. The wife gave birth to a super giant baby. Both would have died without great doctors. A week in the hospital or both. All are fine now. Well, that sounds very harrowing, Luke, but congratulations. I'm glad that it turned out well. I was wondering how that happened, and I know it's been a while ago. So wonderful. That's great news. Really. Get a gun so you can protect them now. Trump is getting killed in the polls. He was getting killed in the polls last time, so who knows? Did you watch the show Cops on Channel Fox back in the day? Occasionally, not like regularly. You called Zimmerman a Karen, and to be fair, he kind of was. Now they had had a series of break-ins in that neighborhood, and so it's fine. But like, he was kind of. Trayvon was acting weird because he was probably high and he was having problems with his girlfriend or whatever. Which, whatever, that's not in and of itself a terrible thing. Um, Acting suspicious isn't a crime. He was acting suspicious, so that's not a crime. And Zimmerman called the cops on him. So you know, that's not very good. But he didn't attack Zimmerman. He didn't attack Trayvon. Trayvon attacked him. Did the neighbor even see Trayvon confront Zimmerman? He saw him beating the shit out of Zimmerman, and then he had to move because he was called a racist for confirming Zimmerman's story and perpetuating the white patriarchy. I'm from Mass. Can I get a motel near Porkfest, or do they not book out-of-staters because of COVID BS? You can book a hotel in Lancaster, New Hampshire. And last when I booked, they said that you had to be a like a necessary worker or whatever, and just tell them that you're a necessary worker. I mean, they don't really have any way to prove it, so just do that. Seriously, these riots are malevolent, and I've seen them killing and lynching innocent shop owners. The police even arrested people defending themselves from the... Yeah, I've seen that. Do you think they'll reach a point where where the left start bombing stuff, and how will the media react to that? Uh, they'll call it the justified voice of the oppressed. Just because a neighbor saw Trayvon beating the crap out of him doesn't mean he instigated it. Well, that's true. That's true, but like everything matches what Zimmerman said. Zimmerman has proven to be honest in every other regard. Why would we doubt him here? And why would we doubt what the neighbor said? I mean, Trayvon was beating the crap out of him. The neighbor said, "Stop or I'll call the cops." And Trayvon, even though he heard that, just continued to beat the crap out of him. What kind of mindset are you in where you're beating somebody up and someone says, "I'm calling the cops," and you don't stop? So, yes, it's true. We don't know for sure, but he was put on trial based on erroneous evidence, by the way, right? It was a lie. The statement that Brittany Diamond Eugene created was not her own statement. That was a coached statement from the family lawyers of Martin. And they're obviously disingenuous because they did a fucking witness swap. So no, he got tried for that and he got acquitted because all the evidence that we have supports his side of the story. Everything we know supports that side of the story. Trayvon had been fighting. He admits he was fighting. He says it in his own texts. He was angry because of what was happening with his girlfriend. His girlfriend, the whole time that he knew his girlfriend, she had a real boyfriend, and he was just a side gig. She had about 4 guys that she talked to at any one point, and he was like number 3 or 4 on the list, and she had a main squeeze that wasn't him. And he figured it out somehow and was really pissed about it. And why you playing me and all this stuff? And she had played him. But petty little shit. And it's for a 17-year-old guy, I can see why that would be really upsetting, and he was pissed and blah, 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 blah. And he took it out on Zimmerman. And Zimmerman, yeah, was being a bit of a Karen. But you don't attack. Look, if I see someone who's a Karen, I don't run up to them and start beating the shit out of them and breaking their arms. Uh, have you thought about buying a battle rifle like an M1A1? Thought about it. I bought an M1A1 years ago. I bought an M1A1 like in 2009. No, like 2007. Anyone who, I should just say this, and I've said it before, I should do like a, you want to be a gun owner, new gun owner. I highly recommend people buy the book Boston's Gun Bible by, it's not his real name, but the author name, Boston Tea Party. It's on Amazon. An amazing book, all right? And it's a great book if you've never been a gun owner or a shooter or anything, and it walks you through how to go about buying a gun, what guns to buy. I do recommend if you buy one gun, it should be a rifle. It does not have to be a battle rifle. Bolt action rifle, a quality bolt action rifle is fine. If you can get a battle rifle, by all means, and M1A1 is his #1 choice. But also FNFALs are great. HK91s are great. AK-47s are great. AR-15s are not the best, dude. They're so popular because the military uses them. Fuck. There's shit though. Read About Face by Colonel Hackworth. He says it's a piece of shit, dude. This is one of the worst things the U.S. military ever created. But because it's the U.S. military, everyone like loves them. Don't get an AR-15. Get an M1A. Get an HK91. Get an AK-47. Get an FNFAL. Fuck, there's so many better choices. Don't get an AR-15. M1A all the way. But I recommend people check out that book. It's a great book by a hardcore libertarian, and it's really great for people. Like, it is, even non-libertarians, if you read the reviews, like, people who are serious gun people are like, this is the book, man. If you don't know anything, this is where you start. He doesn't believe in 5.56. Yeah, all my rifles are in 308, guys. Like, the problem with owning a lot of guns is you can end up with all these different calibers, and then it's very difficult to stock up. So you keep all your guns a certain caliber. So all my rifles are in 308. All my handguns are in 45. All my shotguns are in 12, with one or two exceptions. I've got a 9mm and a 357 as well, and then I've got a couple 22s, but 22 is cheap, so that doesn't really count. But yeah, you try and keep your rifles the same caliber just so you don't have to deal with so many different calibers. And 30-06 is a great caliber, 308 is a great caliber, but 5.56 and 223 are like, you don't know. I watched your hypnosis video this morning. I went down to the hypnosis rabbit hole. I watched so many videos. I started to get hypnotized. I think I should try it out. Yeah, so I actually had some people contact me after that video, and they said, "Are you all right? It looks like you were zonking out. Are you like, is your brain mush?" And no, my brain isn't mush. Yes, I can go into trances now that I couldn't before. Yes, I was. If I start talking about getting brainwashed and getting hypnotized, and I think about it too much, it can happen to me, sort of. And that happened in that video, and a lot of you saw that. Doesn't happen all the time, and I can distract myself and stop it from happening by and large. But several people contacted me about that. I'm like, "Are you all right? It looked like you got your brain was mush, blah, blah, blah." My brain is not mush. I just on a hypnotism kink. I've also had multiple people reach out to me say, "I'm into hypnotism. I've been into hypnotism. That's a great video. I've never seen. That's like the best video I've seen on hypnotism." And I've worked. Someone contact me say that they work for hypnosis stage shows all the time, and he gave me some of their names, and I looked them up, and like there's some legit hypnotic stage show people there. Um, there are very few videos on YouTube that actually talk about hypnosis in anything other than a demonstrative way. And I don't know why that would be, because it is a fascinating topic. It's an interesting topic, and I don't see a lot of people are interested in it. So like, I wanted to talk about it because I was interested in it, but I also thought, hey, there's probably an audience here, and that video is probably going to have legs. I'm thinking it's going to end up being like the communal shower video or some of the foreskin videos, where there's an audience for that doesn't have a lot of content. People are unwilling to talk about it because it gets into a whole bunch of areas that people are not comfortable talking about: sexual kink, submission, domination, mind control, loss of control, obedience, all these things that um, people have in their lives but don't like to talk about explicitly. And I'll admit, I'm not always entirely comfortable talking about it, but hey, I find it interesting and I wanted to put it out there, and I did. And yes, one of the guys I hypnotized, he called me the next day, said, "I went down a rabbit hole. I spent 4 or 5 hours reading about hypnosis all day yesterday, all this morning. I want to know more about it. I want to be more involved with it." So it is something that people can find really, really compelling, if they let themselves go with it. So congratulations, I guess. Get someone to hypnotize you and see how it goes. And try it out with your girlfriend. Dude, the sexual potential of hypnosis is just unbelievable. The stuff you can do. Like I said in that video, imagine whatever it is. She could hypnotize you to go down on her. Like, say she likes it when you go down on her. You could become hypnotized where that's all you literally have no other idea. You're focused on nothing else but going down on your girlfriend. And then she could just lay there for an hour and enjoy and snap you back into it whenever she wants. Or you could have her hypnotized to suck your dick and not want to do anything else and be completely focused on that. And on and on and on. Those are just two examples that come right to head. But you could go on. You could do sensory. So if she's got sensitive nipples, you could hypnotize her so that those nipples become even more sensitive. Right? They aren't actually, but they will be perceived as such when you touch them, and like, that's amazing. So yeah, there's a lot there that I think people would find valuable in their sex lives and in their lives generally. Greatest tragedy of my life is missing out on the age of affordable milsurp. I don't know what that is. Uh, just stopping by to say hi, off for a bike ride in 10. Great content as always. Thanks, Harrison. I've been hiking every day. I've been doing 9 miles on Mount Kearsarge. I uploaded a video by that so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. Not many people watch that video, but hey, I hiked 10 miles and took video for y'all to watch. But I do that every day now. Um, we'll try to make it to Parkers 2021. Have fun. Awesome. Have a good bike ride. Examples come right to head. Yep. Oh, military surplus. I mean that the U.S. federal government has fucking fucked consumers on this because there have been many instances where other countries found massive surpluses of rifles and their import was restricted. All this, you hear all this stuff about like AK-47s ending up in Africa. Shit, that stuff should all be in the United States, man. We would pay higher prices. This is where the money is. They just make bans on it. But you don't think that the surplus AK-47s or AK-74s that they've got in Romania or Bulgaria or Albania or Czech Republic or wherever else, shit, that would be the American market can definitely absorb those. And you get little examples. My uncle was telling me that he's got an M1 Garand that Greece had. We gave Greece like 1 million of them in 1948, and they found like 40,000 of them that were in the crates with the grease, never opened, never touched. And obviously they're not going to use M1 Garands in Greece now, and so they ended up bringing them back to the States, but they were only selling them to like veterans and people. Like they made it difficult, and he ended up buying one. Shit, dude, they should just make that all like American consumers would eat all that stuff up. So, not that people. This isn't something thing people make, but all these, Lord of War type arms dealers who are taking all these guns and selling them to Africa or wherever else. If the import restrictions were lifted, they would take them here because we would pay higher prices for them. I watched the hiking video. It was nice. I've also had tons of time during the scandemic to get out in nature. Yeah. They in New Hampshire, they were saying try not to go outside, and then people said, "So are we allowed to go hiking?" And they said, "Absolutely, you're allowed to go hiking." And so I've been hiking a ton, and that place where I hiked, Mount Kearsarge, it's a state park, and it's actually closed, but you just walk around the sign and walk up the road, and it's fine. And um, it's a couple days I've gone and had it all to myself, which is nice. Killer views. I was actually able. I have a pair of binoculars. I took them up there today. And I was actually able to see Manchester skyline from there, which was amazing. Uh, what do you think about the recent polls? Biden, blah blah blah. I don't know. I don't follow the polls, guys. I don't really care. It's way too early. Who knows? The polls they're not worthless, but they are not like a panacea here. So I don't know. I feel like most of this is going to help Trump, but I could be wrong. Do, 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 do. How many miles do you hike typically? So the every day this week I've done a 9 mile round trip on Mount Kearsarge, which is it's about 2,000 feet of elevation up, 2,000 back down, and then 9 miles, 4.5 up, 4.5 down. And I do like 10 miles is a good. If you're doing a mountain, 10 miles is good. If I'm doing flat, 15 miles is better. So there's another trail by my house. It's 15 miles, but it's flat. I'll do that. And if I'm going to do elevation change, more like 10 miles is better. Why do you think most of this will help Trump? Because he's going to be able to successfully couch himself as the law and order president, and nobody's going to blame him for this. No one's going to blame him for George Floyd. That's certainly not his fault. I don't think anyone would argue that it is. It's in a state that he lost. It's in a city that he lost, right? And um, just like COVID, man, no one's going to blame him for COVID and the horrible the the restrictions. He was very wise. I don't know if he did this for political savvy reasons or for like epidemiological reasons, but he kind of left it to the governors. So like if you're pissed, if you live in Michigan and you're pissed, you're not going to be pissed at him because he's not the one who put in the regulations. It was Governor Whitmer, right? So he's not going to get much blame for any of that. So the other thing is, I do think that as they reopen, the economy is going to start getting better. I don't know how much better, and I don't know how fast, but it's going to help them. So, do you hike by yourself? I try and hike with a friend if I can, but if it's a question of not going at all and going alone, I'll go alone. I'll go alone. Trump is authoritarian through and through. I would not disagree with that. Who do you think was a worse president, Reagan or Papa Bush? Papa Bush. Although if you read David Stockman, you hate them both. I've been reading his book, The Great Deformation. He does not like Reagan, and he was in that administration. Yeah, crisis presidents do very well typically. Yeah, so COVID and this, I think, are going to help Bush or help Trump. Uh, I've seen people blame him already because of the speeches. Yeah, but they blame him for everything, right? So there's this cadre of liberal never Trumpers who blame him for everything, but they've been doing that all along. So it's like you can't win with them, and they're not the people who are going to vote for him anyway. Do you think Biden will win Michigan if he picks Whitmer for VP? Why or why not? I think if he did, that would be, I thought about that. He might pick Whitmer because she's in Michigan and it's a swing state and whatever. I don't know, man. I'm from Michigan. My family's from Michigan. My family is split between Whitmer is a tyrant and she's an evil bitch and fuck her and I hope she dies. And I think she's doing a good job. It tends to be, she seems to be kind of Hillary Clinton-esque in the sense that like her supporters, they like her, but they're not like avid, you know, uh, like religious fanatics, and the people who hate her just fucking really hate her guts. She's got that grating personality of like the pedantic, um, uh, uh, let's see, what's the term? Condescending, talks down to you, says she knows what's best for you. She's got all that going for her or against her. So if he picks her, I guess there's a good chance that he'd win the state, but I don't know. Like it depends on the economy and all these other things, and um, yeah, I mean these riots. A lot of people are going to vote for him because of these riots. Yeah, of course, Ted Nugent hates Whitmer. She's a bitch, dude. I hate Whitmer. I don't even live there anymore. She's such a fucking hypocrite. She's so full of shit, and it's been awful to watch. People I know who castigated those protests. Oh, this is wrong. They're being selfish. People are gonna die, and now they're like, go protest. Black Lives Matter. Blackout Tuesday. And I hate the police. And it was a murder. It's just like, but no, the only way they look at it is in a partisan way. It was just like the people protesting the Iraq War. That was all partisan bullshit. Only 1 in 100 of those people was a serious anti-war person. Yeah, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, a couple others, and the rest of them were just fucking hypocritical, partisan Democrat pieces of shit. No offense to my family, but like that's what we have with her. That's what we have with COVID. That's what we have with these riots. It's so wrong. It's so nauseating to see these real issues get twisted into a partisan issue or a race issue when they're not necessarily that. It'd be like making the Iraq war into a race issue. Dude, they lied to us for an aggressive war and committed war crimes and killed 1 million people. Who cares what race they were? It doesn't matter that they were marginalized Arabs. It matters that they were people. I don't know how someone could actually support Whitmer because they're told to, because they're told that the protesters are racist. That's what they said. The protesters are all racists. Whitmer said that they were all the Michigan militia, which is just ridiculous. There might have been some Michigan militia there, but I doubt it. I mean, there weren't many federal employees there. So she said that they had Confederate flags. Dude, look at the pictures the media took. Every flag I could see was American. So even if they could find, oh, there's one, dude, one Confederate flag out of 100? Shut up, bitch. Dude, that's such a misrepresentation. And then she said they had fully automatic weapons, which is either a lie or she's a moron. I think she's probably a moron. She just doesn't know that, like, nobody there brought, I mean, fully automatic weapons aren't 100% banned, but they're not. That you need a class 3 FFL. Like, they weren't at that protest. No one brought a $30,000 machine gun to a protest. They're semi-automatic rifles, for God's sake. So she's stupid or a liar, or both. Also, she got caught. Her husband, this will be funny. Her husband went up to their second home. This is so funny. They said that you can't travel to your second home. So Michigan, Steven Crowder talked about this, and he's from Michigan too. Michigan, I believe, is the state with the highest proportion of people who own 2 homes. It's very common for people to have a home in Detroit or some in Grand Rapids, someplace in southern Michigan, and then to own, like their family will own a cabin on a lake in northern Michigan, whether it's on Lake Michigan or Lake Huron or Higgins Lake or Houghton Lake or Torch Lake. There's thousands of lakes in northern Michigan. It's very scenic. It's very rural, great. It's wonderful. And you have a lot, and sometimes like the property values on Lake Michigan in particular are ridiculous. You can talk $1 million for an acre, but you have families that they built a cabin there in the 50s when it was cheap and they still own it or whatever. She said that you could not go to your own summer home. Like if you wanted to get away from Detroit and go up to Leelanau or Charlevoix or Petoskey or wherever else, Corinne, rural, and have your own cabin, which you already own, you couldn't do it. But if you were from out of state and you had a second home in Michigan, you could. So somebody from Chicago or from Milwaukee or from Indianapolis, if they had a house, they could. What the fuck? Well, anyway, she's got a second house like many other Michigan people, and her husband went up there, even though she said you're not allowed to do that. And she's like, well, he had to rake leaves. What the fuck? You said that anyone who protests you is fucking killing grandma, and you send your husband up, and then he went to like they have boats. A lot of times you have a service. You don't keep the boat on your own property. You take it to a place. They store it for you during the winter, and then you say, hey, I'm going to come at this time. Let me give you the boat. And he comes to get the boat, and he's like, hey, can you give us our boat? And they're like, well, you got to wait in line. People that it's going to take a while. And he goes, well, I'm the governor's husband. Can I get it sooner? And like, actually, that means that you're going to go to the back of the line. We're not going to give you your boat until who knows when. So like, people fucking hate her guts in many parts of the state, and I don't know, but my family is like split. Some of them, like, I would love to talk to them and be like, okay, what's the deal here with protests? Protests are totally selfish and evil and kill grandma, or protests are like a civic duty that must be protected no matter what. Of course, Ted Nugent hates her. I mean, Ted Nugent's hilarious in who he hates. When he's got, I mean, he used to have Janet Reno statues with loincloths that he'd shoot with an arrow and a dildo would pop out. And have you ever protested or gone? Not in a long time. In college, I went to a couple. I don't know if I've been to one since. Blackout Tuesday made me quit Insta. I never got onto Insta, so I didn't have to quit it. People seem to really like Cuomo. Some people think that he's being groomed to replace Biden. There's some people who think Biden's not going to be the nominee after all. Uh, did you hear about the scandal with the lieutenant governor of MA getting caught hosting a giant party at her house while preaching about social distancing? No, I didn't hear about that, but why am I not surprised? Look, it's one of the most common characteristics of the government is that they're hypocrites. Like institutional, it's almost like the institution of hypocrisy is what the state is in many ways. And yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that, but I hadn't heard that. It's funny though, if you had protested and if you had a protest in Boston, oh, you're evil, but they can do that and it's fine. Protests would be so much cooler with tanks. Like, God, I wish they'd legalize them. Tanks are legal in the United States. In fact, they're very expensive, but I actually don't think that the requirements to own one are that hard stringent, other than the cost. Yeah. What do you think about the rioting? I like that they destroyed cop property, but not real property. Yeah, I'm 100% agree with that. Burning down the cop station, yeah. And I'm a big, some of you know, I'm a big Marvin Heemeyer fan. Marvin Heemeyer was the guy who built the Killdozer. Just type in Killdozer in Granby, Colorado, and he demolished the police station, and he's a hero. He killed himself, so he's dead. But like, uh, totally legitimate. Burn the cops down, burn down cop cars. I agree with that. But I don't agree with destroying private property. Like, what the fuck? That makes no sense, dude. That's absolutely wrong. And there's this, I don't buy for 1 second, oh, this is how protests. This is people who are taking advantage of the protests as an excuse to go wild and loot and whatever. Right? There's a certain number of people in every place that are waiting for that. What's happened, same thing happens when a hurricane goes through Florida and the police shut down, which they will do. There's people who are waiting. Okay, police are gone. It's going to go out. It's going to be time to loot, right? So it's not because they're protesting anything. It's because here's a chance to go and run wild. And people in Florida get their guns out and say, yeah, give it a shot, see what happens. So uh, did they destroy private property, not just cop property? They did destroy some private property, so it's absolutely not acceptable. Um, I don't buy this. This is a type of protest, and they're doing this because this is how they, express themselves. Nah, that's not true. Alex Jones must be having a field day with this whole thing. Yeah, maybe, except he's not on YouTube anymore, so I don't know what he's saying. The last I heard about him was how he was talking about Joe Rogan going to Spotify. June 4th is the Killdozer anniversary. It was at 2003 or 4 that happened. Today is June 4th. Well, damn, I should do a Killdozer. Um, I don't need to do one because what's his name? Count Dankula did a really good Mad Lads episode on Marv Heemeyer. There's a whole bunch. There used to be a bunch of like tribute music videos to him that were really good. But a lot of them got taken down. Um, but yeah, Marv Heemeyer is a hero. He didn't kill anyone but himself, and he destroyed the property of all of his enemies who used the power of the government to oppress him. I've got a Killdozer t-shirt. Uh, there's one that says "Tread on those who tread on you," and it's got a picture of the Killdozer. 2004. Okay, so we're going on 16 years. 16 years today. Story about the puppy that got tortured and killed and left to hang on the fence of the owner's property got my fiance really upset. Amazing cruelty out there. And I didn't hear about that story. That's just sadists waiting to express themselves and get applauded in the media, apparently. It's amazing, too, that not to, I'm not saying this is a slight, but something about killing puppies that make people upset. So like there's a whole website called Puppycide, which is about the police killing puppies, which they are apparently very want to do. Wow, so today is June the 4th. So today is the 16th anniversary of the Killdozer. So everyone go after this video, type Killdozer, look up Marv Heemeyer. Count Dankula's um, view of that is really good. So this is a guy who moved to this little town called Granby, Colorado, which is a beautiful city. I've been there a couple times. It's in the Rocky Mountains, about 40 minutes from Denver, way up in the mountains. Beautiful town. Biggest lake in Colorado is called Granby Lake. It's right there. And he opened up his own business, and it was like a muffler shop, and some locals tried to buy it from him, and he said no. And they offered him a lot of money, but he's like, nope, this is my business. This is going to be my thing. And basically, there became this long-running dispute between him and this family. And unfortunately, though, this family was like in city government, city manager, whatever. And there was kind of this dynamic of like, we're the locals and you're the, interloper. And a very long legal battle ensued, not like in the courts, but through ordinances and zoning and whatnot. And eventually, they basically cut off access to it. Like they zoned the property out. They cut his sewer lines, and then they fined him for not having sewer lines. He bought a bulldozer to try and make a new driveway, and then they basically zoned that out of business. So he sold the area to a trash company, and he had 6 months to vacate. But he took the money from the trash company and used the 6 months to convert the bulldozer into a killdozer with 6 inches of sloping steel, corrugated armor, with closed circuit televisions, compressed air, like it had its own air filtration system, gun ports, and he demolished all the property of his enemies. It's amazing. Sometimes reasonable people must do unreasonable things. Yeah, and it was amazing too because he said that he was open about doing it. People saw what he was doing. He said God clouded their judgment. They saw what I was doing, and God clouded their minds, and nobody took him seriously. He's the guy who snapped and was like, "Fuck you all," and they couldn't stop him, man. They could not stop him. Tanks are legal, but the main gun has to be disabled, and they aren't street legal unless you ruin the aesthetics with safety lights and a license plate. Yeah, and I also think you have to put rubber padding on the treads so they don't tear up the road. Um, the amazing thing I like the Killdozer is the creativity. It's actually amazing what he did, because doing a muffler shop, he did some serious welding, and there was no way in or out. Like, he lowered it, he got in the dozer, and a crane lowered on this like a sarcophagus. It fit perfectly, and once it was on, that was it, man. They had to use an oxyacetylene torch to burn him out, and he'd killed himself by then. Um, Fucking incredible what he was able to do. So yeah, I just imagine, oh, revolution's impossible. Yeah, that's one guy, dude. If a million people did that, just imagine. Mm. That's today. I should have worn that shirt. I've got that shirt. Let me see. Let me. I want to go off camera to find it, but I have a Killdozer shirt. That story makes me sad. Imagine the mental abuse. Yeah, to have a dream, to make it come true, to work your ass off to make it happen, and then to have people be like, "Yeah, we're taking your dream away. Fuck you. We're the city. We can do what we want." And just to fight it, he did a petition. He did everything. They just didn't listen. He was okay. You didn't listen to me. Fine. Have you seen the movie Leviathan? Russian movie inspired by Killdozer story. Nope, never seen it. Do, 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 do. Have you seen the new Killdozer documentary? I think it's called Tread. No, I haven't. Where is it? Antifa, BLM, and the leftists in general are stoking a race war. I have no doubt that some of them want there to be a race war. I think that Antifa definitely wants there to be a civil war. They're fucking stupid if they want that, to think that they'll come out on top of something like that. But I agree that that's what's going on. And we have reports. Who was the police chief in Richmond saying, look, the people doing this they're not from Richmond, they're not from Virginia, they're not even from the Mid-Atlantic. and it sounds like they're coming from like Portland, Oregon. So yeah, they want there to be and there's evidence that they even work with white supremacists because they want the same thing. They want there to be a race war. They want there to be a revolution. That's fucking insane that they would want that, and stupid that they think that they can get it. So let's see. Let's see if there's any more stories here. Gun shops in Los Angeles area attribute rise in sales to looting and protests. Yeah, I wonder why. Gun sales skyrocket amid unrest in Illinois across the nation. That's a Chicago station. Bill aims to tax gun sales, ammunition in Georgia. Residents express distaste. Yeah, I wonder how they're going to vote. Local firearm sales increase amid nationwide protests and violence. Look at people, if you don't own a gun, now's the time. Oh, please, I have to read this one. Okay, here's the Boston Globe. Gun sales shot up in Rhode Island. I like that. Gun sales shot up in Rhode Island in the first 2 months of the pandemic. But here's this one from Mother Jones. How the NRA is using coronavirus fears to drive up gun sales. Oh, okay. Meta narrative here. All gun rights is a product of the NRA machinations. This was similar to the all those protests that happened in Virginia, and he's like, the governor was like, they're just getting ginned up by the gun lobby. This is by Matt Cohen. Oh, that's a lovely picture. Some cities are reporting a surge in gun violence. Yeah, well, it might be the riots going on. Oh my God. The first sentence. Just weeks into the nation's coronavirus lockdown, the FBI reported a startling statistic. It's startling. The month of March smashed the Bureau's all-time record for processing background checks for gun purchases. Since there is no national database of weapon sales, the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS, is considered to be the best available indicator of how many firearms are being sold. According to the FBI, NICS recorded 3.7 million background checks in March, which was 12% higher than the previous record set in December of 2015. So, okay. In other words, since the pandemic began crippling the country, people have been buying guns at a staggering rate. I love how it's a startling statistic. Nice little dig. We don't have a way to really track this. Maybe we should. Why didn't I read this one earlier? It's tough to determine who exactly is buying the guns and for what reason, which makes the title of the article completely stupid, right? If they don't know who's buying them or for what reason, how can we assert that it's the NRA? But I'm sure we'll find out here in a second. Anecdotal report. This is a joke. Anecdotal reporting suggests that many of the sales are panic purchases by first-time gun owners. Of course, it's helped that President Donald Trump, after a lobbying blitz from gun rights groups, issued guidance that gun shops should be considered essential businesses and allowed to remain open, even as states were forcing other retailers to close their doors in an effort to slow the spread of the virus. Second Amendment's, yeah. This guy probably also thinks that like weed dispensaries should be open though, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Many state governors complied, and some even reversed previous orders to have gun stores closing, citing Trump's guidance. Yeah, this was a case in LA where they tried to close them, and they said, we're essential, come and close us. That wasn't anything to do with Trump. That was people who want their guns. The National Rifle Association filed lawsuit against local jurisdictions that forced gun stores to shut down, including the states of New York and New Mexico and 2 counties in California. Good for the NRA. They're not perfect, but they do a lot of good. For gun control advocacy organizations like Every Town for Gun Safety and the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, the spike in firearm sales is beyond alarming. Yes, it would be to them, wouldn't it? And they worry that it could lead to a surge in gun violence. No, no. They're worried that it will lead to a spike in gun ownership. They don't like gun ownership. They don't like people owning guns. That's what bothers them. It wouldn't matter if the gun deaths, if the gun homicide rate went to 0. If people still owned guns, they would be fucking alarmed. That's what they don't like. See, the number of gun deaths, however measured, has been going down for decades. Gun homicide, gun suicide, accidental deaths. They've been going down, but the rhetoric has been increasing. But the thing is, total gun ownership has been going up. So that's what really bothers them. Despite the coronavirus lockdown, some cities such as Cincinnati, Philadelphia, and Chicago have actually seen increases in shootings since the crisis began. Well, they did let all the criminals out, and they said the police aren't going to police anybody, and people are desperate and they don't have jobs. Maybe they shouldn't have shut down the whole economy. Meanwhile, a number of police departments and hotlines have reported spikes in domestic violence calls as women have no choice but to quarantine with their abusers. I like how that's a spike in domestic violence, so that's women getting abused, not possibly any other. Like, I wonder how many of them are like lesbians, many of whom own firearms. Okay, but all right. Yes, many white people also own firearms. Gun control advocates also worry that more people with firearms combined with economic chaos and increased social isolation could result in a rise in gun suicides and accidental shootings. I don't know why it would lead to accidental shootings, but all the anecdotal evidence that we are seeing, massive increases in domestic violence, hotline and shelter group calls, and unemployment numbers, the isolation, the increased alcohol use, all point to a rise in gun deaths, says Andrew Patrick, director of the political communications for the CSVGV, Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Okay. Okay, that's all the anecdotal evidence, so the not evidence. All right, whatever. Do we actually have an increase in homicides, though? At the center of the controversy is the NRA. Well, it isn't, except you would just put it there. It's just the NRA. It's just a lobbying organization. Doesn't have that much money. It's at the center because you put it at the center. Ever since the emergence of the COVID-19 sent the world into a tailspin, the group has sought not just to fight to keep gun stores open and boost firearm sales, but also to stoke fears and suspicions during the country's darkest hour. Right. I wonder how many articles Mother Jones has about how we're all going to die of a horrible plague. But that's not stoking fears and right. How many people has coronavirus killed, and how many people have guns killed? On social media, in videos, and in blog posts, the nation's oldest and most influential gun rights organization has repeatedly pushed out alarmist messaging suggesting that the pandemic will lead to a societal breakdown and that the only way people can protect themselves and their families is by purchasing a gun. A, that's true. B, how many people are watching that? I've never seen any of that, and I'm a huge gun rights person, right? So these inner city people who are buying guns for the first time, they're not on an NRA like mailing list. They're not getting this NRA content. This NRA content is suppressed on places like YouTube. So yes, that's true that they're producing it, but also it is the only way people can protect themselves. Like, what is the argument here? Is there going to be a paragraph later that explains how the police can reliably protect people and that's why this is stupid? One NRA video from March features Carletta Whiting, a disabled woman holding an AR-15 style weapon, explaining the importance of having a gun. I wonder if Carletta, let me check. I have a hunch here. Carletta. Let's look at images. You can see my hunch here. Here. There she is. So why is the fact that she's obviously black omitted from this story? Like, if she had been white, a white man, and here's the thing, like, the NRA is not stupid, and they know they've been going for the optics They have an African American constituency, and that's why they've got the Colin Noirs of the world, and they're out there, and they have, but they won't give it to them. They're going to pretend like she's white. A disabled woman, not that, admit that she's a black woman, but she obviously is, if you couldn't tell from the name. An AR-15 style weapon, explaining the importance of having a gun. I know from history how quickly society breaks down during crisis, she says in the video, which is interspersed with footage of looting, and we've never faced anything like this before, and never is the Second Amendment more important than during this public unrest. I don't want to say it's never been more important, but it's important. There we go. Okay, I'll give them credit. They show the NRA post, and there's a picture of her. They don't describe her as black, but I mean, she's got the hoop earrings to prove it. In another video shared last month, country music legend Charlie Daniels unloads on pro-gun control lawmakers. Left up to some politicians, all you'd have to defend your home with would be a stick, some rocks, and if you're lucky, a slingshot, because they want your gun. They want them all. Yeah, it's funny too, is like the people who are like, the people who write this article do actually want that, but then they will ridicule people who point that out as being, that's ridiculous, or that's a conspiracy theory. But then they'll write articles about, we should just abandon the Second Amendment, and we should have an Australia style, blah, 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 blah. There's this degree, this mendacious willingness at blatant deceit, where they just deny their own position when you bring it up in this course of a debate. But then, you know, when they're not having a debate, they'll admit it. None of this is a surprise to John Feinblatt, the president of Everytown, right? The organization dependent on the money of billionaires like Bloomberg and the blood of children. Right? That's how they exist. That's the fuel for their fire. He's seen this playbook from the NRA before in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and at times during the presidency of Barack Obama, who the NRA repeatedly suggested might confiscate Americans' guns, which Mother Jones would no doubt applaud. But what's happening now, Feinblatt worries, could have far more serious consequences. Yeah, because non-gun owners have become gun owners, bitches, in big cities. A lot of black gun owners probably too. Just the optics of this are just not going to fit the narrative. It's not going to be good. Since the outset of this pandemic, the NRA has argued that the Second Amendment is a constant in time of crisis. Blasted the FBI's background check system, yeah. For delaying people's access to firearms, yeah. Against black people especially, I've seen it with my own eyes. And suggested that one reason Americans are buying guns is because, quote, law enforcement is stretched thin due to the sick of quarantine officers and hundreds of inmates being released from jails and prisons. The group has pointed to fears that certain goods may not be restocked at local stores. The supply chain can't keep up with demand, and has argued that Democratic politicians are exploiting the pandemic to push gun control efforts. Yeah, well, they exploit everything else to push gun control efforts, so why not this? Fuck, Whitmer is trying to ban motorboats and fucking garden supplies. They've got two lines that they're going on with. That the only way to stay safe during the pandemic is to buy a gun. I mean, you can get locks on your doors and whatever too, but like, it's the most effective thing you can do. Despite the fact that you can't shoot at a virus and that criminals are on the loose, food shortages will lead to looting, and COVID-19 responses are a sign of the apocalypse. Feinblatt says, it's a tragedy because in a time when there's already a risk of heightened domestic violence and suicide, this type of fear-mongering is making matters all the worst. I like how his rebuttal there, he doesn't even rebut food shortages, criminals, everyone's getting released. That draws no comment, even though that's like at least half the argument. And this is where the whole gun death or gun violence instead of homicide, they always include suicide, because that's the only way you can get big numbers, because that's 2/3 of the gun deaths, the gun violence, or suicides. But they're just ethically and practically speaking, just totally different things. You can say it's a tragedy when someone kills themselves, but should we lose our right to own guns because one person kills himself with a gun? And as if they were suicidal and they didn't have a gun, they wouldn't commit suicide. If you believe that, I've got a really tall bridge that you can't jump off of on the moon. It's impossible to link recent examples of gun-related violence to the kind of messaging that Feinblatt describes, but publicly reported details about several such incidents underscore his concerns. Yep, anecdotal evidence, the best kind of evidence. At a bank in Athreta, Georgia, according to police, a man allegedly pointed a gun at two people wearing masks and gloves and yelled at them to back up because he feared getting coronavirus from them. A man who allegedly fatally shot his 13-year-old cousin by accident told police that he was arming himself to protect amidst the COVID-19 scare, in the words of the Albuquerque Journal. And on an island off the coast of Maine, where they have constitutional carry, by the way, a group of local vigilantes with guns allegedly tried to force out-of-towners renting a house into quarantine. Okay, but if you favor the quarantine, you'd favor the police doing that, right? Right? It's fine if the police do it. It's not like they would ever abuse their power. By the way, why are there protests happening? I can't remember. But if a citizen does it, that's the problem. That's what they're really worried about. That's awful. Citizens have guns, and I don't agree with them forcing people into a quarantine, but that's what they don't like, is the fact that it's... More recently, a security guard at a Family Dollar in Flint, Michigan was shot and killed after he told a customer that she had to wear a mask as required by a state executive order, according to law enforcement officials. Well, that's pretty fucked up, I'll admit. But is that the NRA's fault? Like, this article is about the NRA. How is that the NRA's fault? Right? Every gun death is on there. They got blood on their hands. Flambet worries that incidents will put further stress on healthcare systems that are already buckling under the pressure of COVID-19. I like evidence that they're buckling. Corona-related incidents of gun violence and more gun violence is only going to do one thing, he says, which is strap up precious resources that are completely strained in the hospitals. Well, that's an exaggeration. The NRA's coronavirus messaging comes at a time when the group is basically on life support. Like a great number of other nonprofits, it's been hit hard by the crisis economic fallout. Earlier this month, Politico reported that the NRA had laid off more than 60 employees since the pandemic began. Even before the virus hit, the group was in deep financial hole. Since its mammoth financial effort to help elect Donald Trump, it has struggled, spending more money than it was raising as internal scandals and expensive legal battles drained its finances. Feinblatt suspects the NRA is seizing the COVID-19 as an opportunity to right the ship. They're exploiting people's fears during the pandemic, and they're going to blah, 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 sell more guns and raise money. Yeah, but the thing is, they encourage people to sell guns or to buy guns, but when people buy guns or guns are sold, that money doesn't go to the NRA. There's this like conspiracy theory that the only reason we have gun control advocates in the United States is because the gun lobby encourages people to own guns, and then they buy guns, and then that gives money to the NRA. The problem is the NRA doesn't sell guns. All right, it's a lobby organization. It's a political organization. They don't sell guns. So when you go to the store, all those people lining up to buy guns at their store, not a penny of that goes to the NRA. So, and there's no... The reason the NRA has money is because people give it money, and people give it money because they agree with what it's doing. Asked to respond to Feinbach's criticism, the NRA took aim at Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire Everytown founder, an erstwhile Democratic presidential candidate. Everytown must be reeling after Mike Bloomberg's pathetic showing in the presidential primary proved billions of dollars can't buy elections, so they're resorting to blatantly false narratives. A spokesperson for the gun rights group said, "Let's correct the record. The NRA does not make money off gun sales. We are a member organization operated on donations and dues from good people across America. We work tirelessly during this pandemic to keep gun stores open so that law-abiding families can keep safe." Hats off to them for doing so. Yes, that has resulted in more gun owners and more self-defense voters across this country. Oh, boom. So true. And yes, most of them will likely remember that Biden, Beto, and Bloomberg want to confiscate their guns and abolish their rights to self-defense. Yes! Not all of them, I'm sure, but some of them, yes. Meanwhile, as the coronavirus death toll continues to rise, thousands of people, often decked out in MAGA gear, have participated in protests against stay-at-home orders. Many of the demonstrations, which first started in Michigan but have since spread across the country, have been the work of right-wing protesters who, like Trump, have looked to blame Democratic governors for the economic fallout created by the pandemic. Well, if they're the ones shutting shit down, then they are the ones who are to blame. Okay. Early polling suggests the protests are unpopular with the general public, but They proved to be a breeding ground for fringe conspiracy theories, like that the NRA is doing this to pump. Okay. Trump, for his part, has poured gasoline on the fire, tweeting out support for the demonstrators and encouraging them to, quote, liberate their states. Last week, as Michigan lawmakers met in Lansing to debate an extension of Governor Gretchen Whitmer's emergency orders, dozens of screaming, armed demonstrators entered the state capitol building, demanding to be let into the legislative chambers. In response, Trump praised the protesters on Twitter, calling them very good people and saying that Whitmer should give a little and put out the fire. She just declared, look, she just basically declared martial law. Like it's an emergency, she can do whatever she wants. To ban the sale of fucking motorboats and gardening equipment. The NRA, in both public messaging and in statements by members of its 76-person board of directors, that's ridiculous, by the way, has encouraged the demonstrations. Earlier this week, the group endorsed Republican Dan Rodemer, a former professional wrestler now running for Congress in Nevada, who led a march to the governor's mansion in protest to Governor Steve Sisolak's stay-at-home order. In a video of the march, several protesters can be seen carrying firearms. Oh my God. Citizens with guns are scary. In an op-ed for the Daily Caller, NRA board member, former Georgia Rep. Bob Barr, soft spot in my heart for him for the hearings on Waco, and he also was the Libertarian candidate for president in 2008. Barr said the coronavirus national emergency endangers the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. He's absolutely right, writing that it appears the federal government is readying additional measures that would undercut one of our founders' deepest fears, use of the military for domestic law enforcement purposes. Yep, totally valid. In a different op-ed for the conservative news, well, I don't know what that has to do with this story, though. Barr echoed NRA messaging about the importance of having a gun during a pandemic, writing, "It is precisely in times of emergency when the risk of looting and other criminal behaviors increases that the right guaranteed by the Second Amendment become most important." I think what's most important is when the government is tyrannical, but, you know, second place is during a pandemic, sure. On Twitter and Facebook, the NRA board members have been more direct in pushing to reopen the country. Rockstar and board member Ted Nugent said that protesters at an earlier anti-lockdown rally in Michigan were my people. Yeah, he's from Michigan. Another board member, Alan West, a former member of Congress from Florida, tweeted, "Doggone, open up the economy, get the American people back to work. Treat us as adults, not as infantile drones who can be herded to and fro as political pawns." After the latest Michigan protest, West tweeted that the most dangerous virus in America right now is not COVID, it's tyranny. Willis Lee, I mean, this is ironic from a fucking Bush supporting Republican, but fair enough. Willis Lee, another NRA board member, tweeted that lying media and corrupt Democrats want America closed. Okay, this is so off topic of the thing of the article, though. Like, okay, we get it. You don't like Republicans. Last week, Anthony Calandro, an NRA, so he must be white, right? Anthony Calandro, NRA board member who has a history of hate speech. I'd love to see what that are. I won't click on it, but I'm sure that's amazing. Attended an anti-quarantine protest in New Jersey. In a video posted on his Facebook page, which have since been removed, Colorado called the pandemic a bunch of bullshit. Prior to that, well, apparently it is. If you can go protest now and without anything, then it must be bullshit, right? Because if it's a serious pandemic that we're all going to die from, and those protesters in Michigan earlier were totally evil and selfish, then why is it allowed now? Prior to the rally, Calandro posted a now deleted video encouraging people to attend. In a video shot at the rally, Calandro said COVID-19 is a media virus and added, "We're being spoon-fed socialism every day, and 8.5 million are just bending over and taking it. You know what? I hope you all get an anal probe with a microscope in it because this is what we've become, sheep." Okay, wow, nice words. The NRA spokesperson wouldn't comment on the statement made by Calandro or other board members, telling Mother Jones that board members don't speak on behalf of the organization. So I don't know, this whole last part of the article, there's no evidence that this is caused by the NRA, that people are doing this because the NRA, you title it, like this is just a complete narrative building. It's all the NRA. There's no genuine desire to own guns. There's no genuine gun rights movement. It's all just the NRA, even though they admit here that the NRA has been like eviscerated by the lockdowns. So thank you, Mother Jones, for that enlightening piece of journalism. Sorry, guys, I haven't seen your comments because I was reading that. Whoa. Who the fuck drives hours out of state to get a state to riot, get a job? That is their job, to start riots. A bit off topic. M1 Garand, a good weapon. My uncle fawns over it being a World War II rifle. Yeah, it's a great weapon. General Patton said it was the greatest, most deadly implement ever created. So it was the first semi-automatic rifle that the U.S. Army ever issued. Obviously, the Germans had their Sturmgewehr, which is what the AK-47 is basically a copy of. That's a little bit earlier, but uh, it's a great rifle. Obviously, today its capacity, they didn't take magazines, so I think it had like a 5-round, 5, 6, 7-round. I could be wrong about that. Um, because they used clips, you get clips that would put into it. Obviously, that's not any of the 20, 30 rounds you can get nowadays. So the M1A is a much better, that's like a modernized, better version of an M1 Garand, but M1 Garand is a totally great rifle. I think it fired 30-06, could be wrong about that. It's a great gun. Even today, an M1 Garand it would be an awesome gun. Um, I want to buy a gun, but I have to fix my car first. Live in Mississippi, summer is coming. Yeah, man, just get a Mosin Nagant, man. They're like $150, and they beat the Nazis, so it's good enough. George Washington, founder of the NRA. Yeah, no, it was after the Civil War. Come on. Don't read Mother Jones. You lose brain cells. Ryan Falk described mainstream media as basically the blogs of journalism majors. Yeah, I actually really liked his latest video, and I agree with almost everything he said. There's a couple journalists who are famous, who can make it on their own, but the vast majority are people who went to a couple schools like Columbia and one or two other ones, and they all think the same things, and they're all boring, blando. They're basically NPCs themselves, again with some exceptions, and they are completely beholden to their employers, and but they have the same ideology anyway, and they're basically NPCs. They think what they're told and what they were taught to think, and that's it. And they are entirely engaged in narrative creation. I actually thought that was one of Ryan's best videos, by the way. And I'm not always a fan, but that was a really good video. Um, have you seen these articles coming out about so many of the first gunners being problematic? Problematic for her. Well, so there's a legitimate thing to be said about if you've never owned a gun and you don't know anything about them. To be a responsible gun owner, you should know something about them and you should have some training, and not in the sense that legally you should. It should be open for people who can't afford that or don't have that currently, and you often need to get the gun to handle. I do advocate that people get some kind of training. At the very least, find somebody who's proficient and have them take you out to the range, sign up for a class, whatever it takes. I think though that ultimately, like, the right-wing people want people to get guns, and they're not going to say you can't get them unless you do all these steps. Left-wing people don't want people to get guns, and they'll say just about anything to stop them from doing so. And so, yeah, they're going to say this is problematic. The main problem, though, is more people are getting guns, which is what they obviously don't like. The people at Mother Jones, the people at Everytown, the people at the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, they just don't like there being more gun owners. They don't like people owning guns. That's the problem. People owning guns, not the homicide rate, not the suicide rate, not crime. They don't like people owning guns. That bothers them. They have a vision of the anointed. They have a vision of the world, and in that vision of the world, the state sculpts everything, and you don't want anything that could possibly interfere with that, and guns can interfere with that. They also just hate the idea of autonomy. They hate the idea of people having guns. Many of them have hoplophobia. Not all of them, because some of them are actually gun owners and are total hypocrites, like Chuck Schumer or Dianne Feinstein. They're not hoplophobes. They fucking own guns, right? Dianne Feinstein had a very hard to get concealed carry permit because she, quote, needed it when she was the mayor of San Francisco. But many of them are actually legitimate hoplophobes. They just think guns are scary and guns are bad unless the cops have them, and they fully agree. Full automatic slingshots. Only if you have a permit. And there's a stone limit. It's funny, my mom, big time liberal, just asked me how to buy her first gun while she's in her late 50s. Go to the store and buy one. It depends on what state. If she lives in a state, she may not even have to go to a store. We had a shooting at the mall here, I think the first day that it reopened. Anti-gun family members now understand why people want guns. Yep. Hey, I love watching your videos late at night or very early in the morning. Well, it's apparently when I like to make videos is 5 a.m. for you. Hope the live stream just started. It's been going on. You missed the beginning. People in New Hampshire seem to like SIG, but Glock is better. Yeah, there's a big 6-hour factory here, but I don't own any SIGs. I only own a Glock, and I actually don't like it that much. Um, how is it there in America? Is the police killing everyone, or is it only in New York? The police kill. You have a 1 in 150 million chance on any given day of being killed by the cops. So it's not very high. How's Greece? I was just telling a story, Dread Pirate Alex. Not that you would know this, but um, back, I think during the war against the communists in Greece, the U.S. government gave the Greek government like a lot of M1 Garands, an excellent World War II rifle, and they didn't use them all. And at some point in the early 90s, they found like 40,000 of them that had never even, they were still in the crates, they still had grease on them, they'd never been touched. And they ended up re exporting them back to the United States, and my uncle ended up getting one of them. Uh, I can tell you haven't looked at Mosin prices in a while. Sad. Where do you live? Man, last time I saw Mosins were 150 bucks a pop. What are they now? 200, 300 bucks? You're shitting me. Dude, look, they've gone everything. Look, we've got inflation like crazy. I mean, I was buying guns before 2008, and then we had Obama. And like, so when I bought my first handgun, a brand new Beretta, like a 92 FS or PX Storm or whatever, like a brand new a Glock, Beretta, SIG, 400 bucks, 500 bucks. If you got a high end, a nice one, it might be twice that, like a nice, like not functionally any better, but just, fancier. And now it is double that now. Like a new Beretta is going to put you back $700 or $800, and that's even a couple of years ago. It might even be more now. Um, and yeah, it used to be, fuck, dude. I've read that in the 90s you could get, like pre-ban before 94, you could get AR-15s and AK-47s for 200 bucks, 250 bucks. Um, you could get HK91s for 800, 900 bucks. Now, like an original HK91, it's like $3,000. Now you can get like US facsimiles, which why not? You can get those for a couple hundred, well, 7, 8, 1,200, 1,100. So look, the prices on these things just keep going up and up and up, right? Because of inflation, because they retain their value, and because there's always this threat that they're going to be banned at some point, they just keep going up in value. Obama was terrible for it, all these bailouts, all this other stuff. So, and the demand is just not, the demand never goes down. The demand just goes up, it seems like. So they're actually a really good investment. Mosins and SKSs used to be cheap in Canada. Yeah, they used to be cheap everywhere, man. And they should still be cheap, man. There shouldn't be 3D printing, whatever, all that stuff. Import, the American market can absorb all these excess guns from the rest of the world easy. You can't really flood the market. There aren't enough. Well, you Americans can't even find SKS anymore. I bought my SKS for 200 bucks. When was that? Yeah, I've heard stories of AKs under 100. Like if you go to the early 90s. That's just nuts to me. You go, I'll take 10, their discount, 10 for 1,000. Jesus. And you know what? There's people who did. The thing is, like these guns, they're not really perishable. If you take care of them, they last forever. And I've heard so many stories. Like there was a business that was like a party store. They sold food and but they also are like an outdoorsy store, so you could get like fishing poles and bait and stuff. And they sold some firearms, um, and they made the licenses more stringent, and so they let them lapse, and so they could only sell certain types. So they could sell like muzzle loaders and stuff. But they buy guns too. And man, one time a guy came in and was like, "Hey, I've got this gun. Do you want it?" And so they bought it, and then they're looking at it like it was a fully automatic. I think it was an AK-47. It was like this was like just off a Soviet assembly line. Somehow this guy had it, and that owner didn't. He didn't sell it, and he didn't turn it in. So like that's in somebody's closet somewhere in Michigan, probably to this day. 2018. Wow, they're really cheap here. Not anymore, Joel Thompson. You have to turn them in. You got a letter. You got to turn it in. Those are not for hunting unless you're Native American, or excuse me, First Nation. I remember seeing a video of a guy saying that the U.S. could buy an SKS for 90 bucks. See, nowadays, any gun that you bought for under 100 bucks would be suspicious. I've seen like Lee Enfields from World War One that were like 90 bucks, and they didn't look safe. They might have still worked, and that was 10 years ago. I remember seeing them in like Texas for 90 bucks, 100 bucks. I've bought guns for 100 bucks at gun shows, but like if you don't open the mail, you're not obligated to follow government orders. I heard that there were a whole bunch of Canadian gyms that were saying we're all just going to open and see what happens. I hope that they do. Did everybody see the MSNBC clip where they were in Wisconsin and berating everybody there for not wearing masks? The reporter's got his mask on, and the lady in the MSNBC headquarters is like, "Aren't they worried about a second wave?" And this guy walks up, he goes, "Your cameraman's not wearing a mask. Half your crew's not wearing a mask." So fucking full of shit. Do you think less of minarchists? Less than anarchists? Yes. Less than socialists? No, absolutely not. You know, minarchism is the second best political ideology. Like I get it, but it's also kind of weird that it's like government's evil and never works, but except for these three things that are the most important things, and it won't grow somehow. But look, at least they understand that it could cause a problem, which is more than most people think. Anyone broadly libertarian is fine with me. Once we get within 5 million miles of a libertarian state, they'll start worrying about minarchists or something. Yeah, fair. There was a restaurant near my area that opened up against orders. The health department threatened to fine them 500,000. They closed down again. Yeah, it sucks. But if every restaurant had opened, would they fine them all? Don't those Health Canada workers have to eat someplace? It's also been funny to see like the nurses protest. Don't protest the lockdown. That's evil. Oh, BLM, yay! We support you. The fuck is You're in a deep trance right now, and when you wake up, you will abolish the police. Uh, Wait a second. Are you by Hiking Buddy or not? We have to support our nurses. They are essential twerkers on TikTok. Are most people at PorcFest anarchists or general libertarians? That's a good question. I don't know. I've never taken a survey. It is a definite mix. There are lots of anarchists there. It's very common, but certainly not all. There's lots of anarchists there. There's Republicans there, man. I met the chair of the Republican Party of Michigan there one year, Solonousis. Some really hot suns, but like you get regular libertarians, you get left libertarians. There's like kind of socialist people there. There's always something called the Alt Expo, which are the left libertarians. So there's a lot, and there's a lot of people who just go, man, for fun. There's like local people who are like, this is just the biggest party. This is the most fun. Uh, they just like to go camping there. So it is quite eclectic. I think that the anarchists, I mean, if you're going to go somewhere, it's the one place you're going to go where you're most likely going to find the most anarchists. Like if I compare it to something like Students for Liberty, I'd say it's more anarchist than that. But there's a lot of ANCAPs there as well. So I don't want to say 50-50, but like that would be sort of generally kind of what. I mean, if you've been to PorcFest, what do you, the rest of you all think? Um, I mean, I've met protectionists there. I remember being at the fire and the guy was like, I favor tariffs. And I was like, did you get lost? What the fuck are you doing here? But, you know, there are people who believe that, right? And, um, I mean, Gary Johnson was there and all his support, like a lot of his supporters came there and spammed that with his fucking bumper stickers. Uh, fucking Bill Weld came one year, right? I don't know what. I think he was expecting a warmer reception than he got. So yeah, there's like local Republicans who show up. There was a Maine politician there who was a Republican. There were even last year there was this guy. He had a giant New Hampshire flag and a double-bladed axe, and he's walking around shirtless, and he's like, New Hampshire's the best. And I went and talked to him, and he was like, I'm not a free stater. I'm from New Hampshire, but he's like, you guys love New Hampshire, so I love you, and I'm just here to support y'all. And I don't think he was libertarian at all. I brought a Democrat to PorcFest. All are welcome. Yeah, all are welcome, unless you're the government. What the hell was Bill Wall thinking? Bill Wall had ambitions, and he was desperate for support, so he went someplace where he thought he might find some, and he was dead wrong. What? The guy is fucking delusional. I mean, he's been running against Trump in primaries. I brought a Democrat to PorcFest. People should bring Democrats to PorcFest. I remember there was another incident where police cold-bloodedly killed someone. The name was Daniel Shaver. Yeah, I referenced it earlier. I'm not sure if you've heard of this. You can find the video on YouTube. Yeah, I actually absolutely have heard of it. Absolutely chilling. Absolutely chilling. That I talked about it earlier in the thing. That cop on his rifle was inscribed, "You're fucked." And at the trial, the judge said that's not admissible. And I'm like, what if it said, "I'm going to kill you even if you're innocent, motherfucker"? Would that have been? He would have said that's not admissible either. See, the thing that wasn't a big deal though because Daniel Shaver was white, and so doesn't fit the narrative. They ignore it. There's no. You can't claim that it was racism. So that guy walked, and there was no. I mean, he totally walked, dude. He works. He's a cop right now, and he got a severance package. For the record, I had nothing to do with Bill Weld coming. Okay. At PorcFest, do you have to go for the whole week, or can you go for a day? No, as much as you want. 1 day, 2 days. I recommend people go on the weekend, Friday, Saturday. Those are the busiest days, but you can come at any time and go as many days as you want or don't want. I still remember that old YouTube video of two agents getting kicked out of PorcFest. Hilarious. Yeah, I was there. I didn't see that happen, and somebody emailed me like, "Oh my God, did you see that happen?" And I had no idea that it happened. Yeah, he was shot and killed. It wasn't such a big deal. Um, no, it wasn't because it didn't fit the narrative. I remember Ben Shapiro talking about it and said, "Yep, this is straight up murder." I watched a video of a murder committed. And he's a lawyer, and I mean, he says he's funny because he's kind of libertarian, but then he supports the police and Zionism and all that. But I don't know, okay, no, it's perfect. But people talked about it, but there weren't riots. It wasn't a big deal. The media didn't give two shits about it. And there's a video of that. There's many, many other examples. More recent one would be like, is it Daniel or Douglas Lemp, the libertarian guy who got shot in his bed? Are there glows at PorcFest? What's a glow? Can I see your feet? Yeah, you don't have to go to PorcFest for the whole time. You can go for as many days as you want. Yeah, the cop who killed Daniel Shaver is collecting $31,000 a year pension for the rest of his life. Glow in the dark equals fed. Oh, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't surprise me, but that's always kind of a fun game to find out who is or who isn't. I don't know that. I've never seen proof that there are, but there could be. It would make sense. Duncan Lemp, yeah. I think that the glow in the dark guys would be the ones who are the most obviously like calling for like violence. And I have I have heard that at PorcFest, but it's really rare. Like I don't think I've heard it the last time I went, or maybe even the last two times I went. Um, that's kind of like a dead giveaway that someone's a Fed if they're like, "Hey, let's go fucking blow something up." It's like, "Oh, okay, yeah. Do you work for the ATF or the FBI? Which one?" Not only is he getting 31,000 a year, I think he just got another job at a different place. What a fucking piece of shit, dude. Where's the? That's and it's like I tell they kill white people. I'm like, no, they don't. And I post a video of that, and they have no reaction. They don't even react to it. It's like it doesn't register. They've been told that the problem with police is that they're racist, and so when they see a video of police killing a white guy, it just that's not what they've been told to think. So it just doesn't register. It does not register. You're an NPC. I hate that term, but it's like true. They react how they're told to react. So protesting is wrong until the media says protesting is right, and then it is. And the issue they're told to care about is Black Lives Matters and racism. And there's this horrible racism problem. And it's actually a huge injustice to the fact that we do actually have a huge problem with the police that is quite independent of race. Or if there is a racial element, it's very marginal. Boop, 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 boop. All right, guys. 2 hours, 18 minutes. Any final questions? Final call. Final question. Are you a glow? No, I don't make enough to be a glow. Reason that's a great video on Biden being a hypocrite on police. Yeah, I mean, he was all for the crime bill and all that stuff. And now he's like, no, that wasn't me. It was just the states. And it's funny. He's just wrong on every issue. You were getting very sleepy. As soon as I snap my fingers, you will fall asleep on camera. There's no way for you to snap your fingers in chat, so I'm safe. It only works when you're actually a hypnotist. Boop, 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 Thanks for the stream. Thanks, Canadian. Come to PorcFest if you can. Have you read any of those Will Ariel Durant stories on civilization books, and what is your take on them? I've got a couple of them, and I bought at a library. I've never read them though, so I don't have anything to say really. I've read about them. I've read other books that mention them, but I not enough to like know anything. You are still deeply hypnotized. That's the big trick. I got hypnotized a month ago, and I'm still hypnotized. I have no friends. Will that be awkward at Porkfest? No, you'll be in the good company. There's lots of people there with no friends. You'll make new ones. Just be friendly. Go to the fire. Have conversations. It's a great place to socialize and make friends. Just be vivacious and willing to talk. This time is going to be different because the formal stuff will be there won't be very much formal stuff going on, so it'll be a more organic pork fest, which I think is good. Hi from Honduras. Hi from New Hampshire. Libertarians are friendly, all of them. Well, that's false, but close enough. Why were you interested in slave culture in the South in the 19th century? Um, Well, I've been a history buff forever, and I was interested in the Civil War for a long time. And when I was younger, I was interested in just like the battles and the war and all that stuff. And there's lots of really great books on that, and that is really interesting. And then I became more interested in what led to the Civil War. Why was there a Civil War? Why did it happen? Just what does it take for something like that to take place? And I also felt like this is the pivotal event in U.S. history, I think, in so many respects, probably the most pivotal. Uh, Debatable, but I think that's probably correct. And um, despite what revisionists like Tom DeLorenzo would want to suggest, slavery was the most important issue going into it, no question about it. And so the other thing is, it's become such a huge issue in contemporary politics. People are invoking slavery, they're talking about slavery, they're using slavery as an argument and justification and as this original sin type of thing, that like it really made sense in terms of contemporary political debate and in terms of like historical understanding to really know as much about slavery as I could. So I bought a whole bunch of books on it, and I've not read them all, but I've read several. Like I'm probably in like the 99.99 percentile of Americans in terms of how much I've read on it. Like, so I'm not a professor on the topic, but like I know quite a bit, and I want to know more. I want to learn more. Look, it's a super important topic. It's a super important thing to understand for contemporary reasons, for historical reasons, and it's interesting, right? It's just this fascinating thing, and see the change in people's how they thought about it, how they described it, how they rationalized it, how they didn't rationalize it. How do people wrestle with, like, as a libertarian, there's a lot in there for like reform. What do you do when you look at a system that's been the system forever and say this is wrong in some sense? This is a morally outrageous system, even though it is the traditional system through all of history, which it was up to that point. That's what it was. Everyone had slavery. Everyone accepted slavery. The Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Talmud, it was accepted. And yet there were people who thought that it was wrong. And as libertarians, we're kind of in that position right now. There's things that everyone accepts as fine, and then we're like, this is morally outrageous. So there's lots of powerful lessons there, and it's been so useful in debates, man. When people come up and they're like, I feel guilty because of slavery, and it's like, oh, okay, so do you think Angolans should feel guilty about slavery? Do you think Brazilians should feel guilty about slavery? Do you think Portuguese people should feel guilty about slavery? Why should people in Boston feel guilty about slavery? Why should people in Mississippi feel guilty about slavery, for Christ's sake? So, did you think did you think we are already in 1984? No, but I mean, in some respects we're past 1984, in some respects we're not. Um, any opinions on General Sherman? Well, he's a very competent general, very brilliant guy. Probably the first or second best general in the Union, and he's a war criminal. I mean, he's a horrible war criminal. And he had arguments for why, like you give him credit, like he wasn't just, I don't think he was a sadist or somebody like that, somebody who enjoyed, like wanted to do that because he just had horrible desires. He rationalized what he did as articulately as you can, but that isn't an excuse for what he did. I really appreciate your videos. I wish I knew people like you in real life. Hopefully I can find libertarian groups in Southern Ohio so I can meet like-minded people. Like Cincinnati, Chillicothe, Dayton, where are we talking? Ohio, Belpre, Nelsonville, Marietta. I mean, I literally spent over a year of my life in Ohio. Like basically from Belpre to Columbus to Toledo, that axis and then east, I know really well. Cambridge, Caldwell, Youngstown, Niles, that whole area I know really, really, really well. Wait. Are you are you the guy who messaged on the Reddit group about your football team? Who is the best president of the United States for you? Mine is Abram. If you mean Abraham Lincoln, you're wrong. So actually, recently, I'm definitely putting Eisenhower is starting to go on my list of best presidents. If Jared's watching, he'll appreciate that. I think Eisenhower really was one of the best presidents we had in the 20th century, after maybe Coolidge and Harding. Um, but he wouldn't be on my top list. My top would be, well, I always say, yeah, that's you. Hey, Jimmy Bauer, that's good to hear from you. You don't have to answer here, but did you ever talk to your coaches yet? And I always joke that when William Henry Harrison is my favorite president because he died in like 40 days. But if other than him, and I know this is controversial and rightfully so, but Andrew Jackson would be on the list. He did a lot of horrible things, don't get me wrong, but he also did a lot of amazing things that I have to give him credit for. John Tyler, Millard Fillmore, uh, Jefferson was actually a pretty good president. Um, Adams and Washington were not very good presidents. Uh, who was the one? I can never remember. The one who refused to annex Hawaii. Was it Cleveland? Uh, Eisenhower helped usher us into Vietnam. I think that's unfair. Eisenhower slashed the defense budget by 40%, and he actually made the federal budget balanced to where it actually had a surplus, and he actually tried to get rid of the Army to a large extent. He basically thought we should have nuclear missiles and that's it. It was called the New Look, and basically he's like, look, we have nuclear missiles. If we have nuclear missiles, we're safe. And he also seemed to understand correctly that a conventional army would be used for offense. A conventional army would be used to attack other countries, not for defense. He was exactly right, and that's exactly what it was used for. So uh, there was involvement in Vietnam. He didn't start it. He didn't end it. That falls more on Kennedy and Johnson. I think it's very unlikely. Look, when Eisenhower became president, the first thing he did was go to Korea and be like, we need to end the war in Korea. That's like the first thing he did. So he seemed very, and if you read About Face by General Hackworth, he complains about Eisenhower cutting defense spending and being like, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this. I'm a general. I know how it is. I know how much you waste. And actually, David Stockman in his book, his great book, The Great Deformation, says, yeah, Ike was the first president in a very long time who knew how much the military wasted, and he knew how much of a fucking scam it was, and so he cut the defense spending like enormously. So balanced the budget. He didn't undo the New Deal completely, and that is a failing of his. But like you can only do so much. Grover Cleveland, yeah, Cleveland would be high on my list. Um, yeah, interstate highway system sucks. Yes, I look. He wasn't perfect. Don't get me wrong. Well, I wanted to ask my little brother on the team if he'd be comfortable with it. He lives in a different home and for some reason never responded to my calls for a while. I wasn't sure if they'd be a season. Well, let me know. I'm curious how that turns out if you ever get a chance to actually talk to him about it. What about Andrew Johnson, the guy before Lincoln who didn't want to stop the South from seceding? No, Andrew Johnson was the president after Lincoln. He was Lincoln's vice president. His final term became president when Lincoln was assassinated. You're thinking of uh, not Patrick Buchanan, James Buchanan. And James Buchanan is usually considered one of the worst presidents ever. I think he gets an unfair rap, but it still would not put him in the top. When did Vietnam start? Well, there were stages. So as soon as the Japanese left Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh declared the Republic of Vietnam. He actually wrote a letter to the President of the United States, who he thought was FDR, even though FDR was dead by then, saying, we want to be free, and basically quoted from the Declaration of Independence. And they're like, yeah, sorry, we favor the French Empire. And so when the French were trying to reestablish colonial control over Vietnam, which initially they did, when they started having problems, we started subsidizing them and helping to pay, not with blood, but with money. And then slowly that evolved into advisors and then military units. And the shift from military, eventually there was a plebiscite and Vietnam was divided into North and South Vietnam. But the South Vietnamese government was horribly corrupt and not really capable of stopping the Viet Cong from overthrowing it. And so that should have been that really at that point. But the whole domino theory was used. And so they said instead of allowing that to happen, when it looked like they were going to collapse, Johnson made up the Gulf of Tonkin. He said the North Vietnamese attacked us. When I was growing up, this was a big conspiracy theory because people said it didn't really happen. And now we know it didn't really happen. It was made up. False flag, all that shit. This was unknown for sure until much later. But when I was growing up, this was a big conspiracy theory. We now know it's true. It's false flag. And I think it was in March of '65 that they started sending in major ground forces. So that was under Johnson, right? So Kennedy started really amping up the advisor role during Eisenhower. There were troops, there were people there, but it was mostly we were subsidizing the French. Real quick, give me 5 books that are good introductions to libertarianism. Number one, uh, The Problem with Political Authority by Michael Huemer. Number 2, For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard. Number 3, Libertarianism Today by Jacob Hubert. Number 4, Machinery of Freedom. Number 5, what would be a good one? Number 5, let's say, it's a tie between The Myth of the Rational Voter and Democracy, the God That Failed. Boom. Kennedy started the chemical warfare in Vietnam. You think it started with Wilson? You're thinking of FDR. Wilson was dead. Ho Chi Minh wrote a letter to FDR. FDR was already dead, though. Basically quoted from the Declaration of Independence. He offered Haiphong Harbor. He said, help us be independent, we'll give you a naval harbor. And they were like, no, we're helping the French have colonialism again. Harding was okay. Coolidge was okay. Eisenhower, and then Carter. That would be it for the 20th century, really. Then maybe Trump after that. Not Taft, not Roosevelt, either one. They're the worst. Wilson, no. Hoover was a good ex-president, but he wasn't a good president. He was also not a bad pre-president. Terrible president, though. Well, not for the reasons people think, because he was not laissez-faire. That's the dumbest revisionist lie ever. Truman, pretty bad, although he had his moments. Kennedy, overrated like crazy, but not the worst either. Johnson, absolutely terrible. Nixon, absolutely terrible. Ford, Ford's kind of like, yeah, kind of shitty, but could have been worse. Carter, okay. Reagan sounds good, but failed horribly. Reagan was pretty bad. Bush was senior was really bad. Actually, Clinton, because he had so much opposition, wasn't that bad considering he's such an opportunist and has no like. If he has a political ideology, it's so subordinate to his opportunism that it doesn't matter. So he was absolutely horrible. He's a murderer. Like, I mean, would kill people just to change the headlines for the day. I mean, admittedly. So he's absolute scum, but he's also not like a true believer who's going to force his way in. So what about Ford and Carter? Yeah, look, I think Carter is a more conscientious guy, especially as a post president. Carter has been really good, actually. Carter's been one of the best ex-presidents we've ever had. He's now also the oldest ex-president we've ever had, and he's been really good in that role, especially when it comes to Israel Zionism in the West Bank. He's been outstanding. If you read the Prime Ministers by Yehuda Avner, it's very clear where Carter comes down on pretty much the right side of that argument in a way that you wouldn't expect from the president. Pretty sure it was Wilson. Wilson was the president in World War I. He was dead. Ho Chi Minh wrote a letter to FDR in 1946 after the Japanese left. It might have been 1945 even, after the Japanese left Vietnam. So you're a world war off. Wilson, I mean, he had a stroke in like 1918 or 1919 and was incapacitated, and he was dead way before World War II started. What were Truman's redeeming qualities? So one thing I read about in the Stockman book is he believed in a gold standard. He also believed that they should pay for the Korean War with taxes instead of deficit spending, which they did. Not justifying the Korean War. The Korean War is one of the few wars that ended up being worth fighting, maybe, but they did not know that at the beginning. Brian Kaplan points this out. You can't go shoot a crowd because you might accidentally hit Hitler, right? That was the case there. But yeah, he actually paid for the Korean War through taxes instead of through inflation, which is pretty good, I guess. But he also did stupid shit too, like he tried to nationalize steel. He also vaporized hundreds of thousands of Japanese people with atom bombs. So he did clean up the State Department a little bit. They were literally communist spies under FDR, and he cleaned it up a little bit. Not as well as he should have. I mean, he didn't do a McCarthy, but I wish it was qualified. So Truman he's not a good president at all, but he's not completely wrong on everything, which would be basically the case with someone like FDR or Wilson or George W. Bush, or right. He's like, I don't know. Also, Truman also felt like he was actually responsible. Like he wasn't the type to be like, it's not my fault. Like he, buck stops here, all that kind of stuff. Can you make a book about the creature from Jekyll Island? I probably already have. If I read it a long time ago. I wouldn't want to make a book now because it's a video now because it's so long. It is a good book. I do like it. Some people criticize it. I think it's a really good book. Apparently, it's all true too. So. I may have already done it though. If you just search that title in my name, you could very likely find it. Jimmy Bauer. All right, guys. It's 10:43. It's been an hour, 2 hours and whatever minutes. And I've got grinder taps going, so Jesus Christ. So, yep, I think that's going to be it. But thank you all for watching, for commenting.